Time having arrived, I call the meeting to the Financial Committee to order for today, August 19th. And if you could just all please rise and help us salute our beautiful flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, councilors and guests, welcome to our August FinCom meeting. But before we can go any further, Councilor Nicastro.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for a moment of silence right now in memory of a former city councilor who passed away last week. Viola G. Packard served the council for 16 years. She had the distinction of being the first female president of the Brockton City Council. She was wonderful. She served a couple of people before me, but as I've served these past 7 years, she was very helpful to me, very kind and generous with information, always to help me. She loved the city of Brockton, truly. She was also a school bus driver for a number of years, and she also served as the director of the Council on Aging. So, in her memory, I ask you all for a moment of silence. Thank you.
May her soul rest in peace. Mr. Clerk.
Item number one, we have the...
Hold on a sec. Councilor Minicello.
I also request a moment of silence for Mr. Brendan O'Neill.
Please.
A few weeks ago, Brendan O'Neill, who was, everyone knows, from the high school, was an incredible swim coach, loved the aquatic program, an unbelievable coach, passed away, and we lost a great Brocktonian. Brendan still lived in the city of Brockton. There will be services for him announced soon. I'd just like to say one quick anecdote about Brendan. One day I was in the pool watching the kids swim, and he was teaching the dive kids a dive. And they weren't getting it right. Now, this is about 10 years ago. Brendan must have been in his late 60s. All of a sudden, you just see him strip off his clothes. He had his bathing suit on, of course. Doesn't say a word. Goes up to the diving board. Hits the dive like you wouldn't believe. Sits down, just says, do it like that. That's Brendan O'Neill, understated. And I just was like, wow, this guy is unbelievable. So just a moment of silence for Brendan O'Neill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor. Mr. Clerk, agenda number one, please.
Item one, acceptance of the minutes from the budget hearings of June 17th, 18th, and 20th Finance Committee meetings.
I will be accepted and placed on file.
We have the acceptance of the minutes of the July 15th, 2024 Finance Committee meeting.
That too will be accepted and placed on file.
We have the reappointment of Mr. Martin S. Brophy of Morse Ave, Brockton, Mass. to the position of Treasurer Tax Collector for a 3-year term expiring August 2027. Invited, Treasurer Martin S. Brophy.
Mr. Brophy.
Good evening, councilors.
Good evening.
I am here for another 3 years of being the treasurer collector for the city, if you so desire.
Questions for Mr. Brophy?
Motion to recommend favorably to the full City Council.
Second.
A motion has been properly made in second. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries. Continue to collect.
Councilors.
Please.
Item 4, we have ordered that the City Council authorizes the acceptance and expenditure of the total grant funds in the amount of $500 from Eastern Bank Foundation, $500, to the Council on Aging, $500. Invited, Director Janice Fitzgerald, Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson. We did receive an email from Ms. Fitzgerald. She had a prior commitment tonight and could not be here.
Mr. Clarkson, anything you want to offer on this particular item?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and councilors. Just on behalf of Janice Fitzgerald, she did say in that email this grant will be spent on exercise equipment, including weights and yoga mats.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Second.
A motion has been properly made and second to recommend this favorably. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries. Number 5, sir.
Item 5, ordered that the following named sum be and the same is hereby transferred as the same was submitted by the mayor as follows. Transfer $63,473.91 from Finance Personal Services Non-Overtime to Human Resources Personal Services Non-Overtime. This transfer will be to cover the salary of an employee being moved from the Finance Department to the Human Resource Department. Invited Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
Mr. CFO.
Again, good evening. Thank you. As I noted in my email to you over the weekend, there are sufficient funds in the finance budget for this transfer because there was a position that was proposed and funded but not approved, so there are sufficient funds. There are still some work that need to be done with the unions to affect this transfer, so it is not final. I just wanted to be clear and disclose that. But because the funds are not necessary to have in the finance department, I'm requesting this so that when and if the personnel and legal requirements are satisfied, that the funds will be available and they can move forward.
Questions?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion has been properly made and second to recommend this item favorably. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries. Numero 6.
Item 6, ordered raise and appropriate the sum of $390,000 to law court judgments. This appropriation will be to fund a court settlement for a recently settled lawsuit. Invited City Solicitor Megan Bridges, Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
Madam Solicitor,
Hello.
the mic is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to hear from me about this matter. I'm asking tonight for your support in the amount of $390,000 to resolve a lawsuit that stems from a claim of excessive force that happened in October of 2018. A Brockton police officer was forced to deploy his police canine to apprehend a plaintiff on a third domestic violence call of the day. The plaintiff admitted he heard someone, namely the police, telling him to stop and not run, but he refused to do so, and the plaintiff admits to resisting after being apprehended by the dog. There was physical force used by the officer, and in defense of that force was reasonable to protect both the officer and the canine. The course of events left the plaintiff with a permanent injury, and he is blind in one eye. And the amount of money that I am asking for you all to support is to resolve the claim with Mr. Sterling, who is the plaintiff, resulting from the injuries from that arrest. I'm happy to take any questions on this. I wanted to bring this out in a public fashion for 2 reasons. I don't have the money in my own budget to fund this. My court judgments line item is $250,000, and it's been that way for a number of years. And also to have a public discussion, if there are any questions, on how we got here. The initial demand was very close to a 7-figure demand, and we successfully were able to resolve it prior to incurring additional litigation expenses in motion practice and a trial. So I'm bringing you what I believe to be the best resolution for this case.
Questions? Councilor Rancourt.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you, Attorney Bridget. Well, obviously, since the passing of the 2024 and 2025 budget, I'm assuming that that is your first request, right?
I'm sorry.
That would be your first request during that budget time?
This is my first request, and I did know about this. I believe I didn't mention the number, but I knew I was going to have to ask for money to resolve this. And frankly, I knew this case was coming last year, although I did not know the number it was going to resolve for, and told the plaintiff there's no way that the city can manage this in fiscal year, what was 24.
So excellent. So in regard to what you stated earlier, you don't have enough fund, on your budget to fund this. So in the event whereby, I hope not, but in the event there is another settlement, that this council can expect you will come back and request for more money. And that's a possibility. Would that be yes?
It's always a possibility because you can't predict the lawsuits, certainly. But you're absolutely right. You know, we should have these conversations in public. This is a lot of money. I certainly recognize that. The use of force policy for police has changed. This was criminal justice reform. But I know of nothing imminently in the pipeline right now, so I'm not expecting to come back anytime very soon. But if I had to, I certainly would.
So in regard to you, you know, obviously submitting your budget to the mayor, you know, obviously we just voted on that. So you didn't know this was going to come up. So with that being said, the money that we voted to give your departments,
Yep.
Technically is not enough. That's why you are coming back and requesting that money so you can pay that bill.
I would agree with almost everything that you said. You can't predict lawsuits of this nature or how they're going to resolve. And sometimes the resolution is a business decision. Sometimes taking it to trial is the right decision. Here, in my professional opinion, I don't think that's the right decision. So I knew I was going to need to resolve this case in this fiscal year. I want to be candid with all of the council. It's not as though this came as a surprise in the month of August, if you will.
So I mean, obviously, even though you know there was a possibility to resolve these cases, but obviously, I mean, the mayor has to cut a lot of money, and I think that was probably part of the possibility of knowing that. I mean, even if you know that you would have to come back, but given the fact that your budget, not just your budget, pretty much every budget in the city was cut,
Correct.
that somewhat prevents you from having enough money to pay that bill.
Correct.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tavares.
Hi, good evening. Actually, I have two questions. My first question, this lawsuit is going to be affected taxpayer, right?
It is the use of municipal funds. I don't expect any type of impact or effect on municipal services.
All right. And then the second question, if you do you not have a budget for, where do you think we can locate this money for? Where we're going to get this?
So, I believe it was in the CFO's email, and so I don't want to mis-explain, but I understand there to be money available to be appropriated. It's not coming from another department. There is. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can certainly explain that. As I mentioned in the email, the total amount of the budget that was submitted to the council for fiscal year 25 for the entire city assumed, and I can get you the exact figure, I have the budget book behind me, but it assumed a certain amount of revenues and a certain amount of recommended expenses. During the budget hearings, you reduced that amount by approximately $7.9 million. But there were sufficient revenues to fund the entire budget, including that $7.9 million. So you still have the ability, before we set the tax rate, which really is the final act of that budget season, to raise and appropriate, to spend that $7.9 million before we set the tax rate. So this money, along with one that you'll see at your next meeting, to put $6 million of that into the stabilization, is money that we can appropriate until that final act of setting the tax rate and the free cash certification is made. So this is not coming from another budget. It's money that you reduced that's now available for spending elsewhere. And that goes for this and for the next two items on the agenda as well. That is the funding source.
All right. That means we kind of have some extra too. It's not going to affect it. Anything, we can go right and proceed with that, kind of like that, right?
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Well, hold on.
Second.
All right. Since the motion was made in second, Councilor Minichiello on the motion.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Could you just tell us what factors, pro and con, you use to determine this would be a good way to resolve this matter for the city?
In sum, the gravity of the injury. I can elaborate if you would like.
Just a little bit, just so we have a flavor of what your mindset is in terms of dealing with this in this manner, that's all.
Civil rights cases, if you take them to trial and you are unsuccessful in defending the case, the plaintiff is awarded attorney's fees, sometimes multiplied damages. And attorney's fees, a plaintiff's represented by Boston lawyers. My most recent experience on this specific topic, $600 is not out of the realm of the per hour rate for the lawyers that represent the plaintiff here. So the plaintiff's version of events is that he was going nowhere after apprehension by the canine. Thus, he raises a question as to why the need for physical contact by the police officer. And the resulting injury is both permanent, and a jury of our peers, I assume, I think correctly, would value eyesight very highly.
I understand. You've said enough. Thank you. I understand where you're coming from and understand why you're recommending what you're recommending.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. I just have one follow-up. So is the settlement $390,000, or is it $390,000 plus the $250 that you have in your budget?
$390.
$390. Okay. All right, motion has been properly made in second. Anybody else wants anything on this? Motion's been properly made in second. All those in favor? All those opposed? It will be recommended favorably.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 7, sir.
Item 7, ordered raise and appropriate the sum of $584,678 to library personal services non-overtime, $393,753, to library purchase of service, $172,850, to library goods and supplies, $18,075. This appropriation will fully fund the Brockton Public Library for fiscal year 2025. Invited Library Director Paul Engel, Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
Before we go any further, Mr. Clerk, I believe the solicitor is also on number 10, and I think she just left.
She may just be on the hall. I'll make sure she knows.
All right. Mr. Director.
Good evening, councilors. So the amount that you have here will fully restore the library's FY25 budget, will allow us to functionally operate the library as in a level functioning and a level environment. And it is a collaborative effort between the mayor's office, the CFO's office, and the library. And my thanks goes out to the mayor and to the CFO sincerely.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion has been properly made in second to recommend this item favorably. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries. Number 8, sir. Thank you, sir, for coming in.
8. Number 8, ordered raise and appropriate the sum of $275,000 to Mayor Personal Services non-overtime, $275,000. This appropriation will help fund the full-time salaries of employees in the mayor's office for the entire fiscal year. Invited Mayor Robert F. Sullivan, Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Mr. Chairman, I know the mayor is here to speak on this line item, but I would like to make a motion to postpone this to the next finance meeting.
Is there a second?
Second?
I'll second it.
On the motion?
On the motion?
On the motion. Well, actually, on the motion, Councilor Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering if, seeing as the mayor's staff is here and the mayor is here, we would give him a chance to make his address prior to a vote to postpone.
I think it's appropriately. Councilor Castro.
I think the mayor's office has made great efforts to address the issues that were discussed at the budget and resulted in the mayor's budget being reduced. I think his entire staff is here. I think they've taken the time to write detailed explanations of their job duties and descriptions, and it has been sent to everyone. So I personally feel it would be a terrible shame to postpone this when they're ready to go, especially without a reason for a postponement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman,
Councilor
in regard to the
Duranencourt.
statement of the ward for City Council, and I think there's a reason in regard to the conversation that we are having. So the premise of this postponement is that instead of like taking a vote tonight, where I believe that, this is me, I believe that we don't have the vote to pass this. And I think it would be in the interest of not just the mayor and of course the staff, but to making sure that if we do take a vote on it, instead of like killing it, but give it an opportunity whereby we can have a continuous communication with the mayor in terms of what we need or some of us need on the council. This is not a vote against the staff. This is not a vote that, certain people didn't know. We spoke about this and we got to what I think is the best way to approach this. This is not a vote to somewhat, punish the staff. And I think in regard to the statement, Councillor, it's somewhat unjust because all I guess I am trying to prevent here is to taking a vote that we don't have. We don't have a vote to pass this, and I'll tell you that. And I think if we do take that vote and it's a vote down, what would be the outcome? But I think by postponing it, we can always bring back to the council whereby, with an open line of communication, we can get a better result. And I think that's the best and the safest way to go. That's why I ask to postpone it, not out of malice, not to punish anybody, but to open that line of communication whereby we know if we take a vote on it, there will be a possibility for us to restore that money. But until then, as we speak, we don't have a vote to pass that.
Mr. Chair?
I think we have Council Farwell, Tavares, and then I'll go back to you.
You ever have one of those situations where you don't quite know where to begin? If someone knows we don't have the votes to pass something, then obviously there's been an awful lot of behind-the-scenes maneuvering, which I don't particularly care for. I like a full, robust discussion out in public of what's going on. The other reason why I would argue against postponing this is that every week that goes by and the mayor doesn't have adequate funds to support his staff makes it even more difficult to make up any arrearage in his budget if he ends up with one. And there's no guarantee that he's going to get funding in the future. So it's important to act tonight. But let me also say that what separates I would think a thoughtful group of counselors is to look at an issue and ask several questions and do it in a very clinical way. So when this request came back in, I looked at a couple of things. Is the request excessive? And it isn't excessive if you consider it's money to fund the staff for the City of Brockton Mayor's Office, which is the 6th largest city in the state. We also know that the mayor only asked for $906,583 for personal services in his budget. I would add, and this is just a statement of fact, it's not a swipe, we're allotting more than that for the Human Resources Office over at the school department. But if you back out the mayor's salary, you only have $717,993 left, and we cut $300,000 of that. And that was a 41.7% cut. Now, it doesn't matter whether a councilor likes the mayor. It doesn't matter whether you like people on his or her staff. We're not junior mayors. We're councilors. The mayor is elected by the residents of this city to make critical decisions, and one of those critical decisions is who's going to be on his staff. And if the mayor chooses people that you may not like the position, I would argue go in and have a person-to-person conversation with the mayor, again, whomever he or she is, have a discussion, but remember, that person was elected by the voters of this city to be the chief executive officer, and in my opinion, the chief executive officer should be able to determine, within reason, as long as the appropriation is not excessive, to determine the people who are going to be on his or her staff and the positions that are going to be occupied. Those are real people over there. They got families. They got bills. They got car payments. They may have mortgages. They may have rent payments. I think we have other things to do as a council than to toy around with who's on the mayor's staff and whether we like them and whether that position is needed or whether it isn't needed. $906,000 to run the mayor's office in the city of Brockton is not excessive. And I would hope, and I've heard this expression before and I like it because it's been referred to not by me, by Abraham Lincoln and Shakespeare. I would appeal to your better angels inside of you. Do you think that man who has been elected mayor 3 times deserves to have his staff, as he chooses, at reasonable salaries? And by the way, you want to talk about reasonable salaries? The communications person in the school department, I believe, is $105,000. I think Ms. McCormick is down around 70, if that. So we do not hand out excessive salaries on the municipal side. But whoever is the mayor, this isn't Bob Sullivan's budget. This is the mayor's office budget. It's the city of Brockton mayor's office budget. We expect certain things out of that budget. We expect human services and other grants writing and a whole host of activities to take place in that office. He was elected to make that decision. If any one of us sat there, we'd want the same latitude to be able to, within reason, have the staff we choose, the people we choose, mold them into a working unit. If you don't like that unit, again, you have every right, because we're all voters. He's subject to our vote, and we have every right to go in and have a discussion with him. But they're real people. They come in every day, they do the job. Whether you like them or not, whether you agree with it or not, he deserves the latitude to determine his staff, and I do not believe this should be postponed. I think we should favorably recommend it, and let's concentrate on some serious issues, folks. Come on. There's more to do in this city and in this city council than worry about the mayor's staff. Thank you.
I have Councilor Tavares, Nicastro, and then Dorancourt again.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
And if I could just caution everybody, let's just keep names out of it. You know, the reason why we're here is to discuss whether or not we're going to approve $275,000, and let's just not call Peter, Paul, Mary, or whatever. Let's stay within the confines of the order, please. Councilor Tavares.
All right, good evening. Actually, I agree with my colleague. Actually, I mean, not agree to postpone this. But first of all, like, you know, I went to city today, like, you know, all the employees was work, and especially when her department was very humid, it's horrible. And I totally believe they didn't even go home. They just kind of sacrificed because they worry about what's going to happen tonight. They're afraid they're going to lose the job. They're afraid, like, if they lose the job, what's going to happen? We have a lot of people who doesn't have a job. And then we have a lot of people roomless because they don't have a job. That's why they become roomless. And when I went there, like, you know, everybody was literally worried about what's going to happen. I literally kind of have some discussion with the Jasmine, like, you know, she was working, sweat, and the department was very, like, you know, muggy. And I feel bad. Just, we're going to put ourselves like us. Like, you know, if you work all day, end the day, instead of you go home, you stay with your family, enjoy, but you decide not to go, you just decide to come here. Like everybody, look at left and right, they here. And then for us to just go like this, not even listen to them, I think it's going to be very shameless, inhuman. And I hope we can just take this tonight, and then I hope we kind of careful vote on this, yes, because at the end of the day, we don't know what's going on, what they're going through. If they lose this job, what's the consequence will be so? And then if this is not going to affect them much, they didn't even ask for a lot of money. And then, like my colleague Councilor Farrell said, if you postpone this, like, if he went out of money, how can he pay? It's not going to look right for city who owe it that money. Then I think we should take this consideration for tonight, and we should take a caution vote for this, and then just put ourselves in the same position. Just see ourselves. That's what I can say. And then I hope we can take this as conscious. Thank you.
Nacastro. Councilor Nacastro, please.
Thank you. Councilors, I don't quite understand what's going on here, but selfishly, I need this, I support this, and I need this to go through, and I'll tell you why. I get a lot of calls from constituents, and ward councilors, I get calls from all your constituents too. When they've waited 5 minutes and you haven't called them back, so they call me, and which is silly, but it does happen all the time. And I would get many, many more calls from constituents if not for the personnel in the mayor's office, because they handle so many issues for Ward 4 residents, and actually for all of your residents. And I don't quite understand what's happening here. Let's hear the mayor out, and let's seriously consider this reduced amount. This is less money he's asking to restore to his budget than what was cut in June. I don't understand what's happening here, but my life is going to be a lot harder, and I think some of your lives will also be a lot harder doing this position. And these people work hard. They are assets. They make us all look better, and our jobs will be a lot worse if they're not there doing theirs. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam. Councilor Duran-Court.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, to go back to some of the stuff that my colleague stated earlier, I will quote, Immanuel Kant, the critique of pure reason is to allow suffering to speak for itself. I think all of us do know, how much these young men and women are working in the mayor's office. So I don't think anybody on this council is trying to take your job away. This is not the case. And of course, some of my colleagues would want you to believe that some of us are targeting certain position. Like, which one of us that state we're gonna do X, Y, and Z? No one has said that. And to the point, when I opened this conversation during the budget season, and one of my colleagues shoot an email saying that my vote was a vote of retaliation. And I never acknowledged, but I understand tonight why that statement was made. Let me just put it to you like this. This is our taxpayer money. I am a taxpayer, so do you. And at the end of the day, I do believe that we have to pay people decently. There's no question about that. None of us on this council believe that you shouldn't have a job. None of us on this council believe that we're going to take your job away. It's a line of communication whereby we as elected officials, we have a solemn obligation to be the watchdog. No one is going to make you believe that some of us up here are trying to take your job away. That's not the case. If that was the case, I could have requested to take that vote. And knowing that there's a possibility for us not to have it, I request that meeting, I request that line item to be postponed. I would even make that to be postponed to the next finance meeting. And I think that's not a bad request to do. And the mayor can speak about it in terms of, like, instead of voting on it, and let me explain this to you. I'm not going to call him, but I want to explain this to you. There's like two possibilities here. If we take that vote, and it's a negative vote, that's it. We can always come back, but that will be a no. But as we speak, if we postpone it, where we open that line of communication, there's a possibility for that to pass. We are not saying no. We're just saying that let's just have a conversation about this. And for some of my colleagues to say that we are trying to take certain job away, how could you possibly say that? And people who are watching this, and those of you who are in the audience, know that that's not the case. But to put my name on an email saying that my vote was a vote of retaliation, it justifies your statement tonight. I'm not going to say who said it, but at least you know who you are. My vote was never a vote of retaliation. It was a vote for the taxpayer money. And I'll be happy to say that. I give the mayor and the CFO applaud for giving the library the money back. Because at the end of the day, we could not possibly afford to close the West Branch and to close the East Branch. This was a fair. And no one on this council can better speak on this other than me because I've been through it, the program that they had. I wouldn't be here without this. And to portray us as somebody who's trying to take that money away, that is unjust. Mr. Chairman, I would make a request to postpone this line item to the next finance meeting.
Well, Councilor, we have already a motion that has been seconded. We can't make a motion over another motion. So it has to be, either you have to withdraw your first
No,
motion.
it's not withdrawing. No, the motion continues, Mr. Chair.
Let me just let Councilor Lally go, and then, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
Councilor Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My only question is not even really to the mayor's staff, but we are talking a lot about having a conversation to precipitate a postponement, or we need to postpone because we need a conversation. I would just wanted to home in a little or get that answer as to what is this conversation. So like what do we need to see from the mayor's office or from the mayor's staff? What is our hang up? What are we, we're talking about conversation, but I wanted to home in a little more on the conversation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think you've already spoken twice. So you have to hold on there for a second. Mr. Mayor, you wanted to say something.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, first of all, I want to thank each and every one of you, and I really want to thank all these people here. These folks come to work each and every day. They're public servants. They're social service advocates. They do not get paid a lot of money. In the mayor's office, they do not have collective bargaining. There's no union rights. They get no overtime. When Jasmine is out at DW trying to take down an encampment on a Friday night at 7:30, she's not getting a penny more. So I'm going to fight for each and every one of these people, because at the end of the day, that's what a department head needs to do. I am the mayor of the city of Brockton, but it's these people that come to work each and every day. And I want to name them all. You know them, but Sydney Merrill is my chief of staff. Stephanie Pierre is the executive aide. Kevin Blaze was the executive assistant, and then when Marcy went over to the HR, he is now the acting office manager. John Massey is director of constituent services and community engagement and outreach. Alicia Montrod-Bullock, constituent liaison. Jasmine Bradshaw, director of community and social services. Celia Canavan, policy and intergovernment affairs associate. Courtney Henderson, director of immigration affairs. Suzanne McCormick, PR, Public Relations and Communications Associate, and then we have one part-time employee, Mr. Joe Francois over there, Constituent Services. All I can say is I served with a lot of you. I sat up there. I was the president for 5 times. If you want to postpone, I will support that postponement. But I just want to say the 275 was a compromise from me, because technically I could have asked for 300, right? But I said to Troy, I honor the legislative body. That's why I come before you. I come before you because I want to advocate to work with all of you for Brockton. But now I have to advocate for these people, because after that $300,000 was cut, the next day in my office, each and every one of these people came into my office, somewhere near tears, saying, how do I pay for my child care? I have student loans. What am I going to do? I have rent. What am I going to do? What am I going to do with my mortgage? These people's lives are at stake right now. Now, I cut money from mayors. Absolutely, I cut money from mayors. There's no doubt about it. Carpenter, Balzotti, Harrington, I sure did. But I never cut money that would fire people. And if I have to fire these people, unemployment benefits kick in. So there's going to be another city expense that none of us are really even calculating what those are right now. But when I'm here today to humbly ask for, if you want to postpone it, I'll support the postponement. I really will. But they took a lot of time to write down what they do, metrics, and data. And ultimately, if the 275 doesn't come back, I will have to do layoffs after the holiday season. That's a lousy present to give anybody. So again, I'm humbly, respectfully asking you to support this endeavor. If it's not tonight, that's okay. I'll come back in 2 weeks. And if you want me to come back next month, I'll come back next month. But at the end of the day, these people deserve an answer one way or the other. Because if I have to terminate them, it's not one job. I'm going to sit down with the chief of staff and try to figure out how we're going to hemorrhage the money, how we're going to do it. And at the end of the day, I cut $443,000 in my budget before I even presented it to you. 2 jobs unfilled. Marcy's job, Jensen's job. Didn't fill them. That's another 100 grand. So I'm at $500,000. And I did that so that we would not have to lay off people in the city of Brockton. When I met with Lieutenant Governor and Secretary Gorkowitz and Secretary Tutwiler and Sean Cronin of Department of Revenue, and Troy was at every one of those meetings, as was Moses Rodriguez as the president, Tony Rodriguez as the vice chair of the school committee, and the superintendent, and Trish Boyer. What I said is, number one, we don't want any jobs, we don't want any layoffs in the city of Brockton. None, any department, including the mayor's office. And we don't want a state takeover. So every department head, and you're going to hear from some of them on another matter tonight, we came together and we did 1 round, 2 round, 3 rounds of cuts. And so when I came here with the mayor's budget cut by over $500,000, and you cut another 300, that's within your purview. I understand that. But then I had to go to this gentleman and say, how long do I have before I run out of money? And these people are going to have to be laid off. And he told me. So that's why I'm here tonight. If you're going to cut from this money, you can cut from this money, but I have to keep advocating for them because that's what I need to do as a department head. These people are representations of Brockton. They speak Haitian Creole. They speak Cape Verdean Creole. They speak Spanish. They speak English. This is the Brockton that we all know. This is the Brockton that represents each and every day. So if I have to lay off people, people that are going to be staying in the mayors are going to be taking on job responsibilities that they were not hired for. They were not hired for. And then they're going to leave because they're going to be burned out. So again, I respect anything that this body wants to do. I truly do. And if it's in the best interest to postpone it, you have my support and we'll come back. But again, I would just humbly ask you, if you want to meet with these people, if you want to do Zooms, we'll do them one-on-one so we don't violate any open meeting law. But I truly, truly need you to understand that this isn't Sullivan trying to go on a junket or Sullivan trying to buy something for his office. This is Sullivan fighting for his employees. These are the people that make the city of Brockton the city of champions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Fowler.
Just a couple of things, colleagues. If first to the chair, to any counselor, and to Councilor Derenoncourt because he made the original motion, I'd like to know what portion of the $275,000 is objectionable. Because that's really what we're discussing is a financial issue here. So what portion of that is objectionable? If the issue is we don't like how the mayor handled a particular issue, we don't take it out on those people. If the issue is that the mayor didn't return a phone call, we don't punish those people. If the issue is we think the mayor should do more streets or whatever it is, we don't take it out on those people. The mayor is the one that's responsible for any grievances that we have about his conduct. And I just get the sense, and I hope I'm not pushed to tell everything I know, I just get the sense that we'll postpone this, we'll put a lot of pressure on the mayor, see if he'll make some adjustments in his staff, and then everything will be fine and we'll vote through some funding for him. I don't think that's the right, that's demagoguery. Either we support 275 or we don't. If it's a lower figure, if there is an objectionable part of that 275, I would respect hearing about it and then responding appropriately. But this is not right, folks. This just isn't right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Thompson, who hasn't spoken yet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, Mr. Mayor. And I appreciate your advocacy for your staff. Yeah, that's what a leader does. So I do appreciate that. And I appreciate the conversations that we had over the last few days about this issue. I'm not a proponent of postponing this matter. I think any discussion can be had in the next week. We still have a week until this matter is ultimately voted on. Let's not keep these people, keep this staff, this wonderful staff, who I work with every day. Let's not keep them in suspense. If there's an issue that needs to be dealt with the mayor, then sit down with the mayor and, deal with it. If at the end of the week we're not able to come to, if the will of the council is not to support this number, then let's talk compromise number. But I agree with a lot of the things that Councilor Farwell stated. let's not keep everybody in suspense. I'm not going to support any postponement. I would recommend this matter favorably to the full city council, and then if during that week there's a compromise number that this council's willing to support, well, then I'll entertain that as well. But let's get this moving. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Are you all set?
No, I'm not.
Okay, go ahead.
So let me just put it to you like this. I think the last time that I took an exam when I was in college, Council Fowler, was in 2017, whereby, I took an exam at Suffolk University. So like I said, I don't want to personalize this. And even as we speak, the mayor just acknowledged that he doesn't mind having this postponed. And to the point, I even said that I don't mind having this postponed to the next council meeting. I don't think anybody is telling the mayor what to do. The mayor is the mayor. The mayor is the chief executive person in the city. We all know that. Each of us was voted. As you represent the entire city, so do I. Stop making this as if I or anybody else is against the staff. We are not. It's an open conversation whereby I made that request to cut the mayor's budget by $300,000. This was not targeting a particular position. And at the end of the day, if some of my colleagues are willing to take the vote, but guess what? We still have, another council meeting coming up. So what I do not want to see, I do not want to see this vote down and then recommend unfavorably, and we don't have any options. What I'm looking at is that having the possibility of looking at what's going on right now and see on whether or not we can pass this. I am all about passing this. I'm not in favor of removing or cutting any money. It's not a question. It's not a question in terms of how much money we are giving to the mayor. Based on the conversation that I have with a certain group of people, people have different way of looking at this. But we are not targeting an individual as if we want X, Y, and Z to go. This is not my will, and I'm assuming some of the folks that I talk to, that's not their will. And if this council is willing to take the vote, that's them. But I made a motion to postpone it.
Thank you, Councilor. I just got a text from Mr. Robert Rules that says that councilors are only supposed to address an item twice. So I think we've done that, and we have a motion on the table. Before we go on this motion, I just want to add one little quick thing. I agree with Councilor Thompson because we can vote on this positively tonight to move it forward, and we'll have a week to have a discussion. And we have the mayor sitting right here who promises to have these discussions that we're talking about. And if we end up here again on Monday and the discussions have not taken place, I'll vote with the negative in terms of cutting it because the discussions did not take place. So I think it's important for us to, we can do it tonight, move it forward, and then come back on Monday. If it has not gone the way we want it done, we have the right and the obligations to do whatever we need to kind of move this forward. A motion has been
Request
properly
a roll
made.
call vote, please. I'd like a roll call vote, please.
Okay. A motion has been properly made and second to postpone this item until a further date. All those in favor of postponement?
It's going to be a roll call.
A roll call?
Yes, for roll call.
Okay, so Mr. Clerk, roll call.
Let me just say this, okay?
Hold on. Now we're.
I will.
Council-
No,
I just want to say this.
no.
For the sake of this stuff, because hold on. I might remove I think I might remove that request to postpone it. But before I do so, I'm going to say one thing.
Well, why don't you make the motion to remove it?
No, I
and
will.
your
No,
second.
Mr. Chairman.
I don't make the rules here. This is how we do things.
Okay, so,
Make a motion to withdraw your motion, get your second withdrawn, and then we'll have a discussion.
I motion to withdraw that request.
Okay.
But on that motion, I would like to say something.
Who was the second?
I believe Councilman Minichiello was.
Yes, I was second.
Your second? Okay, so now you can go back and speak.
So on that motion, I just want to make this crystal clear. None of us up here is trying to get you fired, contrary to that belief, none of us. In regard to the taxpayer money, we have a solemn obligation to talk based on how we want that money to be spent. The mayor is the mayor, and us as councillors, we were elected as well by the people. Because I don't want you guys to leave here tonight assuming that some of us up here, for whatever reason, do not want you to have a job. That's not the case. Like I said, I was the one that made that motion to remove $300,000 from the mayor's office so we can have a conversation. And here we are having this conversation. When the mayor put $275,000 back on the agenda, we have a discussion. And at the end of the day, there will be a council meetings. And tonight, I'm pretty positive we will vote to move this forward. But again, we have a final vote on the council. And based on my conversation with the mayor, and I will come back here and I will make my statement. But I just want to put this on the record. None of us is willing to get you fired. None.
Thank you.
Point of information.
Can I get a motion?
Yeah,
Motion to
one way or the
recommend
other?
favorably.
We have to vote on that.
Point of order. We have not done the roll call. All right, we have withdrawn. The motion was
Withdrew the motion, so that is non-involved.
All right, thank you.
All right, so
Mr. Chairman, motion to recommend this item favorably to the full city council.
Second.
a motion has been properly made and properly seconded to recommend this favorably to the entire city council. All those in favor? All those opposed? It carries.
Thank you very much.
So, Mr. Mayor, you've got a week's reprieve. Get together with the councilors that are on the fence over this, and let's kind of get this over the
Happy to speak with you like we did this week. Happy to speak to individually. I'll do the same.
All right, thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And thank you, folks, for being here tonight as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Number 9, sir.
Item 9, ordered that the city council authorizes the acceptance and expenditure of a donation in the amount of $50,000 from the estate of Francis X. McDonald to the Brockton Parks and Recreation Department. Invited Superintendent of Parks Tim Carpenter, Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
Mr. Carpenter.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, councilors. So this is similar to a recent other bequest from the same estate, Mr. McDonald's estate. That original bequest was $300,000. This is an additional $50,000. Similar stipulations will exist on these funds as did for the original bequest of $300,000.
Any questions on, for a second there, I thought you said it came
Motion to
from
recommend
France.
favorably.
Second. A motion has been properly made and second to recommend this item favorably to the council. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries. Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you.
And now, Mr. Number 10.
Item 10, ordered that the city of Brockton appropriate the amount of $48 million for the purpose of paying additional costs of designing, constructing, and equipping a public safety complex to house the police, fire, and information technology departments, as well as the Brockton Emergency Management Agency, including the payment of costs of designing and improving roadways and utilities in the vicinity of the public safety complex, making improvements to enhance traffic flow, and for the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto. To meet this appropriation, the city treasurer, with the approval of the mayor, is authorized to borrow said amount under Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7-1, or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the city therefore. Further ordered that the city treasurer is authorized to file an application with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Municipal Finance Oversight Board to qualify under Mass General Law, Chapter 44A, any and all bonds or notes of the city authorized by this vote, and to provide such information and execute such documents as the Municipal Finance Oversight Board of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts may require. Invited, Mayor Robert F. Sullivan, Treasurer Martin S. Brophy, Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson, Procurement Officer Mike Morris, City Solicitor Megan Bridges, Fire Chief Brian Nardelli, Police Chief Brenda Perez, Mr. Joseph Sullivan from CHA, Mr. Kevin Sullivan from CHA.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Sullivan, Sullivan, and Sullivan.
We're not related. None of us are related.
Sounds like a law.
Would it be possible, I guess, this is the PowerPoint that's going to be presented by Kevin Sullivan that he'd emailed. I think the one that was actually put into the computer is an older version.
Okay.
Kevin just said he needs about 2 or 3 minutes to put the right one in.
Okay.
Would it be okay to take a recess for 3 minutes?
Absolutely.
Yeah, just to clarify, the PowerPoint on the screen's from
We'll
February
take
5th.
a quick recess, and then we'll come right back.
Thank you.
We're back on. we're discussing number 10, right?
Correct.
All right, Sullivan.
Mr. Chairman, good evening, members of the committee. First of all, I want to thank you for allowing CHA to come before you tonight. The building, if you go by, some of you actually came to the topping off ceremony. Suffolk Construction is here as well tonight, but you went to the topping off ceremony. 40% of that building on Warren Ave, a full city block from Highland Street to West Elm Street, is completed. The 4 department people that are going to be calling that new home, our police chief, our fire chief, our IT director, and director of BEMA attended that meeting. Tonight we do have Chief Perez, Chief Nardelli, and Director Hook from BEMA. Mr. Medeiros was unable to join us. But I do want to say that February 5th, Kevin Sullivan and Joe Sullivan, not related to me, not related to each other, came before you and expressed some information that's creating some cost increases. And I want to be very clear as a taxpayer, I'm not happy either, and I know all of you have some questions tonight. I mean, $98 million was the amount we borrowed. We borrowed that in good faith under the belief that that was going to be enough to carry this whole project to completion. And then 2.5 interest rate we locked in on, so we saved millions of dollars over the term. But at the end of the day, we have a binding contract with Suffolk Construction. The chiefs are here tonight if there's any questions. I know in this bonding authorization, it's just not the amount of money to carry the completion of the building, but also the two-way traffic. Pat Hill, DPW commissioner, is here as well. I said this many, many times. They're synonymous. You cannot have a building without two-way traffic, and you can't have the two-way traffic without the building for fire apparatus and for cruisers from our police department. So again, I support this endeavor. We are going to have a legacy project here that will be lasting for decades. It will also be a catalyst, in my humble opinion, for increased investment on Warren Ave, increased investment on Legion Parkway. But again, Kevin Sullivan, Joe Sullivan are here to answer any of your questions, and you will hear from the chiefs in a little while. So truly appreciate your time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The other half of the law firm.
Thank you, Council President and City Councilors. I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to bring more information that we've gathered since the February meeting that we've had with you. Our presentation will be complete, where we're going to divulge quite a bit of information to you. During the presentation, if you could hold your questions till we're finished, we just want to make sure that all of the information is presented to you, and we'll answer any questions as we move forward. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Kevin.
Thanks, Joe. As mentioned, my name is Kevin Sullivan. Thank you, Council President, Councilors. Thank you for giving us the opportunity tonight to provide some updates. Just for some context, we were here in February. We provided some updates at that time. We are going to recap some of that so that folks can have a good idea of where we were and where we are today. And again, as Joe mentioned, we're going to present, and also Pat Hill and his team are going to present on two-way, and look forward to some questions. So this first image it's just a general rendering of the front facade. And again, just to reiterate, this is not only going to be a state-of-the-art, beautiful building, but if you've driven by the site, which I'm sure many of you have, it's a very large building as well. So hoping this is what the future brings. This next rendering, again, these are images we did show in January, but just to recap, this is a training and meeting room for what I believe would be the fire department. Again, state-of-the-art room with some historical images on the back wall of the city of Brockton. And again, as discussed and reviewed in February during the meeting, this would be the Peace Park. As you can see, it's certainly the gemstone of the site. We were tasked by the mayor with trying to make sure we preserve and salvage as much of the original high school as possible, which you can see in the rendering as evidenced by the original archway, some granite, and potentially some Roman numerals. But again, this is a beautiful part of the site, and we have these materials saved and salvaged. Okay, so the first item I want to discuss is the site. So as you're all aware, based on our meeting in February, we've had significant challenges based on the site, and in particular, a big portion of the original Brockton High School that was imploded many years earlier created cross-contamination and again, some significant challenges and unfortunately, significant costs. What you're seeing here, I'm just going to start with the purple outline, which is the outline of the new public facility. The blue outline is, I believe, Building A of the original Brockton High School, formerly Key Center. That's the portion of the building that remained standing most recently and was taken down, I believe, last spring and summer. And the green outline is the portion of the building that was imploded underground. And so this is really just to showcase, the challenge that the existing buildings and the new building really, they cover the entire footprint of the site. This next image really just focuses on some of the challenges we faced with ledge. As you can see, and as Joe will discuss, there were test pits and borings taken. Unfortunately, based on the location of the ledge, which I think the worst of it was under the original building, wasn't really located or quantified until that building was taken down. But again, Joe's going to talk on that a little bit more in a little bit. And this next image is, again, another site plan, and it really is just to highlight and reinforce some of the challenges we had with cross-contamination. There's various boxes. Again, it sprawls, the contamination sprawls throughout the entire site. There's different types of materials at different depths, and again, cross-contaminated, which is very complicated, challenging, and again, very expensive. And, just one of the things I want to mention is when we, initially started reviewing the site, the general goal was to be able to, or hopefully move some of these soils locally, at least within the Commonwealth. And as the tests started coming back, based on certain levels, it was required that they be moved to certain facilities. There was a facility in New Hampshire that reached capacity, so we were not able to take it there. There was another facility in New York. We had hoped to take it there. They had reached capacity, so we couldn't take it there. So unfortunately, the closest facility we could take certain soils to was in Minerva, Ohio. And as you can imagine, picture 10 to 20 trucks a day for several months going from Brockton, Massachusetts to Minerva, Ohio. Again, very complicated and very expensive. So these are some pictures site progress pictures we looked at during the meeting in February. Typical excavation, anywhere from 4 to 7 feet. As you can see, in many areas, based on the building that was previously buried, we had to reach depths of 20 and sometimes 25 feet, which again is very unique and challenging for a project like this. And I think this image really just showcases how deep we had to go in some places, and again, very, very challenging. And at the end of, the excavation and a lot of the remediation, we were left with with what I would describe as a giant hole in the middle of the city. And fortunately, we've been able to move past that and start construction. But as it relates to, just a general summary, this is a slide that we presented in February. I had mentioned previously that when this conceptual budget was developed in 2020, the estimated site work was roughly $4 to $5 million, and in January and February, when we gave an update, those site costs were estimated at roughly $18.5 million based on some of the details outlined below. And here we are today with some updated site costs. Again, 95 to 99% of the remediation removal has been completed. We're estimating those site costs to be roughly $17.9 million. So a little, not great savings, but certainly less than we estimated when we were here in February. And now I'm going to turn it over to Joe to talk about the budget.
Thanks, Kevin. This slide really, analytically, we went through and looked at what was presented in 2020. And as we looked at each of the costs associated with feasibility administration, owner's project manager, none of those costs have changed through the duration, even when we encountered some of these unsuitable materials within the site. And that just shows that we, not only CHA, but the designer and the administration had a commitment to make sure the city of Brockton, we did our due diligence to make sure that we went through each possible avenue and challenge to try to rectify the most lowest cost. What we did find is that there was a slight increase in the site acquisition. As you remember, there was some city taking of some of the properties to encompass that campus as a quad. And that whole purpose not only benefited the city as making it a single hub for the public safety building, it gave a continuity and a sightline for the whole community to be able to come to that building as a warm, inviting location, as cleaning up those locations in that quadrant around those, the perimeter of that new public safety building. What we did also find is that the construction in 2020 was, we projected it at $63,286,390. The current project costs associated with that, and those costs included the site abatement and cost escalation that we disclosed that back in February that we were encountering after the pandemic, the cost increases, and there'll be a slide that I'm going to elaborate a little bit more just to recap what we provided back in February. But I wanted to give you a clear understanding that we looked at every avenue, every nuance to this building, every cost associated with this building to see where we could make significant cost reductions to try to save the city of Brockton some money based on some of the challenges that we had. But we encountered where it ended up being $92 million for site abatement and escalation costs from the $63 million. The construction of the parking garage, we encountered some site issues with that. The abatement and the cost escalation went from $8.9 million to $14 million. Miscellaneous costs, we really didn't have much of an increase at that, but our furniture, fixtures, and equipment, we were able to look at the overall budget, and between speaking with both departments and the emergency management and IT, we were able to reduce the overall fixtures, furniture, and equipment budget from $8 million down to $6 million. We did that collaboratively, looking at different avenues to solicit proposals for furniture, equipment, and goods as we moved forward, as we needed to fit out this building. And what that articulated is that our budget went from $98 to $130 million. The next slide is the cost comparison. As I indicated back in February, we went through a number of different estimating exercises as this building evolved from conceptual design to design development to construction costs. Those costs back when we initially started back in 2019 were like $340 a square foot. I'm just using those as ballpark numbers. As we projected and we came back to the City Council in 2022, we estimated the escalation to go to $675 a square foot. Those are numbers that I presented. Those are numbers that we felt, as a projection based on how the pandemic was affecting costs and goods and labor. What we found is from 2022 to 2024, there was another $134 difference in square footage cost increases that we could not have anticipated. Now, I spoke with probably a half a dozen estimators throughout the Commonwealth in the Northeast area that not one of them could have seen the spike in from 2022 to 23. So those are like costs that we haven't seen in my lifetime, nor will I probably see in my child's lifetime as we move forward, hopefully. But I just wanted to give you a perspective that, it went up to 2024, $809 a square foot is what most of the costs associated with it were carrying. And that's just a fact based on not only estimated costs, but factual bids that were coming in over several projects that we monitor and we work with throughout the Commonwealth of Mass. The next is, a pre and post pandemic. And Brockton, you're not alone. I mean, Quincy's went through this, and we tried to look at similar projects that encountered the same type of circumstances. And one of the things that we noted that Quincy Public Safety in 2021 had a square footage cost of $746. If you look at that, that's right in line with what we discussed back in 22. It was right around that ballpark value. But if I put the escalation that occurred from 22 to 23, 21 to 23, the cost of gross square footage goes up to $865 a square foot, which carries very similar to the numbers that we projected. Brockton Public Safety in 2023 was $848 a square foot. They were at $865. So we did see somewhat of a leveling, and we started to see, I say it a cost savings, but a reduction in the overall square footage cost. The garage cost for Quincy was $144 a square foot in 2021. With the escalation costs that occurred from 21 to 23, it went up to $167 a square foot. Brockton Public Safety in 2023 was $125 a square foot. So you can see, although the building is a little bit larger in Quincy, our cost savings measures in what we showed in 2023 were in line. And so my point is that, you know, Brockton wasn't the only city and community that was facing some of these challenges. The next thing that we did, and I take this personally because we worked closely with Suffolk, the design team, and CHA to look at every single line item within the schedule of values. And the schedule of values indicates every nuance that compiles this, from site all the way through construction and closeout to FF&E. We looked at every single costs that we estimated back in 2020 and looked at where we stood at the buyouts as we moved forward to see what line item we could save, what line items we could cut without jeopardizing programming, quality, and assurances. This is a once-in-a-lifetime 50-year building, and it's paramount for the city of Brockton to have something that not only the city can be proud of, but the city and folks that work in that building have the building efficiencies to serve the public as needed. At any time, I'd be more than willing to sit with anyone, councilor, to go through these numbers. I mean, there's small print in there, but if you have any questions on that, you feel free to reach out to me and ask me. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin just to talk about some of the value management efforts that we went through. And they were extensive. They were exhausting at times, but I think in the end, we were able to save value for this project and show face to the city of Brockton that we were doing everything we can to try to minimize costs. Kevin?
Thanks, Joe. So I am going to get into the value management efforts that took place by the team, but I just want to back up a couple slides and really reinforce how historically unique, as you can see, the cost escalation and inflation that took place between, say, 2019 and what we're dealing with right now, which is when we were designing and trying to put this project out to bid. It wasn't just unique across the country, it was unique and historically challenging in the Commonwealth. The graph you're looking at right now, you know, it actually came from the Massachusetts School Building Authority. They build schools, but they also collect a lot of data. And it was so unique that the Commonwealth passed legislation of about $150 to $200 million to give the MSBA so that they could help all of these dozens and dozens of districts in the Commonwealth pay for their overages similar to what we're going through right now. Now, I know that doesn't help us out because there isn't a similar authority that gives out money to public safety, but if there was, we'd be getting that money. So I just really want to reinforce how unique the inflation and cost escalation was during this time period before I get into the value management.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yep. Okay, so as Joe had indicated, you know, when we were back here, when we were here in February, we were giving you an update on the budget, and obviously we don't take that lightly. You know, we both take it personally, and we were tasked with by the mayor and as a team to try and identify any and all opportunities to reduce costs on this building. The second part of that is certainly a balance because, of course, we want to save money, but we don't want to compromise the durability of this building, and we certainly don't want to compromise the programming of first responders. So as part of our efforts, we went through about 70 value management items in this building on the site, every line item you could possibly think of. We explored 70 items that totaled about $7.5 million. And on the next slide, I'm going to show you which ones we decided to move forward with. And a number of them we didn't move forward. We thought it was short-sighted, and we didn't think we were getting a lot of bang for our buck, and that we would, if we reduce that cost in the short term, we would immediately regret it within years. Again, during the question and answer, happy to go through any of these specific examples in which we didn't explore. But on the next slide, it really highlights about 20 items that we felt we could accept and move forward with to responsibly reduce budget without impacting program or the longevity of this building. And, you know, those 20 or so items are roughly $2.7 million. And again, we worked with the city, we worked with the folks that are going to occupy this building to make sure they were comfortable with it. And we certainly feel comfortable. Obviously, you know, we would have loved to save more money, but we feel, you know, that this is the responsible approach to reduce the budget but not be short-sighted. In addition to some of the value management efforts that our team conducted, you know, we worked hand in hand with Troy's city CFO's office to identify state and federal funding that was out there. To date, the city's been awarded, I believe, $1 million of ARPA funding specifically dedicated to the Emergency Operations Center. Additionally, they've been awarded roughly $200,000 for the green communities and the Department of Energy Resources for EV charging. And I believe last year we worked together to submit a number of other applications through Senator Markey and Warren's office, specifically $2.5 million for the Emergency Operations Center and $6.3 million for FF&E, furnaces, fixtures, and equipment. I don't believe we received anything back on those. However, we have submitted similar requests to Congressman Lynch's office this year, and we are cautiously optimistic, or certainly more hopeful, which includes $2 million for the Emergency Operations Center and another $2 million for the FF&E portion of this budget. So, again, we're exploring any and all option we can to offset these budget constraints because we understand how significant this is and we don't take it lightly. One of the last items I want to talk about is the potential proceeds from the sale of the police station. If we're fortunate enough to move forward with this project, which I certainly hope we are, after the building is complete and the police transition into the new facility, I believe, and Troy, you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, that there will be an opportunity to sell the police station on Commercial Street, which is currently estimated at between $3 and $6 million, all of which would come right back to the city. Anything to add there?
No, I certainly can answer any questions on that.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm going to turn it back to Joe.
Thanks. And so this slide that I'm going to be speaking about is, what's the risk of actually pausing or stopping construction? Well, there's a number of different challenges that the city will encounter and costs associated with it. One is the loss of staffing from Suffolk Construction, that they're not going to, just sit and wait while we were trying to figure out the remaining financial burden that we have in front of us. They're going to end up relocated or allocated to other projects. Remobilization and greater than a day-to-day delay for substantial completion due to momentum loss. So what that means is basically, if we have to pull out, all of the staff, all of the subcontractors, any of the site contractors that are trying to do finishes around the building at that point are going to end up having to remove all of their equipment, and there'll be a remobilization cost associated with trying to come back. Assumption, we're going to assume 2 additional months of GC to account for restart and revamp of work if we so choose, that once we ended up finalizing the financial burden. And then subcontractor and trade risks, it's an assumption almost $240,000 per month would be a cost that would be increased on the overall project. Storage fees for material, while we've gotten to a certain point, the building is close to 40%, as Kevin alluded to. It's 37 and change percentage complete. The materials that were purchased from our GMP and the contractors that were signed originally, we would have to have that material stored. The labor cost escalation, and we got these data numbers from projects that are currently in the process, assume about 4% a year. Subcontractor and trade management, additional costs, because they're going to look at, there's a certain level of expectation of what their cost of construction and their cost of contract would be, and we'd have to take an assumption on some of those items as well. Temporary measures to protect the material from exposed weather. If work was incomplete and we needed to temporarily protect it, there would be a cost associated with that. Security costs, we looked at a couple of different companies just to see what the cost implications would be to guard the site until we figured it out, and it was close to $25,000 a month. discontinuation of finishes. That's a great indication. How often has many of the councils gone to buy something and, budgetarily waited, and you go back to try to match it a month and a half later, and it's outdated already and non-existent to be able to do? You'd have a very similar situation. And then the hardest impact that we saw that would be devastating is the local people who are currently working on this project that would be stopped. That we took a lot, Suffolk has taken a lot of effort, and the city of Brockton with the mayor has taken a lot of effort to make sure that we reach out to a lot of the city residents to see who we can pull in to actually work on this project, not only for the financial gain for the city on that aspect, but the integrity of actually working on a project within the city to say that they were part of it. And that, that there's a lot of situations in towns and cities that I've worked with. Fall River does a great job. New Bedford does a great job of trying to do that. And having that local population work within the building is sentimental, and it's gratifying at the end of the day. And with that, I'd like to...
Yep, so we're actually going to call up a member of the Suffolk team to just... For the counselors that were not at the topping off ceremony Wednesday, we're just going to look at 3 construction updates. We're going to hear from Kendi Powers of Suffolk.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for having me. So I just want to give you guys a progress report on where we are with the construction site. So right now, we are at 95% structural steel complete. We are on the lower level. We have the HVAC is 100% complete. Plumbing is about 85% complete. The CMU walls in the back, the Sally Port area, that's all complete. And now we are building the CMU walls for the cells on the main level. We are planning on pouring the apparatus bay in a few weeks. Most of our stairwells have been constructed, and we have our stairs. Completed, mainly. I'm sorry.
I'm just listening to the rain, I'm sorry. One thing is, Kendi went to school in Brockton. Guess where the location where the new building's being built?
The Arnold School. So I'm a fellow Brocktonian, and I grew up here. My parents still live on Court Street, just blocks away from the old police station. Thank God I've never been inside the old police station, but I do know that it is old and decrepit, and I do believe that the city of Brockton, our public safety people should and deserve a new building. And I really do hope that, you guys actually go and pass through with this, because they deserve this. They put their lives on the line for us, and my parents are still here, and it's just one of those things that's very close to me. I went to the Arnold School. I went to South Junior High, graduated from Brockton High. I won't tell you what year, because I don't want to tell you. I don't want to age myself. But yeah, so this building so far, traffic management has been awesome. We have had no complaints from any of the abutters, any of the neighbors. It's a very clean site, the cleanest site that I've ever been a part of, and I've been in construction for 16 years. So that says a lot about what we're trying to do here. And we also, we try to, do community engagement. So it's not just hey, we're here to build a building and we're out. It's no, this is a community. We want to be a part of the community. And I hope that you guys realize that we are doing that, and we do care about Brockton. And I really do think that the public service people deserve to have this building done. So please, pass.
I agree. You guys are done?
Yeah, I think we're going to hear from Chief Nardelli.
Actually, before, Kendi, can we have your full name for the record? You weren't on the invited list, so.
Kendi Power Cook.
Power Cook?
Yeah, Power-KOCH.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
I think we're going to hear from Chief Nardelli before, and then Pat Hilston.
Mon Capitan.
Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, councilors. Should I be concerned that everyone had a partner up here except for me at this point. Everyone disappeared. Sure. Good evening, and thank you for having us, obviously, to discuss this project and how important it is to the community and what it means. I think if I could just discuss a couple of things. I know they talked at length about the value engineering and some of the cost savings they've gone through since this project, since we heard in February where we were with this. I think they've described a number of things. We sat with CHA, Deputy Chief Galligan and President Hill and I discussed where we were going to have to be with this because we were concerned, like everybody. Where is this project heading because of the situation financially we were in? In saying that, we were able to sit down then with CHA and KBA and go over some of the lists of some of the pieces of equipment that you actually see on that list. Some things we were able to, whether it be finishings on the walls and things like that, that weren't necessary. They were nice, but they weren't necessary to still build a nice building and put us in an appropriate environment. After that, Deputy Chief Galligan and I kind of were in my office one day brainstorming about a bunch of other things that we were able to potentially take care of. One of them was part of the fire alarm. It's called a digitizer machine that helps when the box alarms come in. We were looking as a potential capital over the next few years to replace that. Well, we did that earlier. That will then go into the new building, so it comes off the cost and creates some cost savings there of around $50,000, over $50,000. Back during COVID, and we had some extra ARPA funds, we were able to purchase a number of turnout gear dryers. The turnout gear that we wear, it's an all-encompassing drying system, so any of the soot materials, carbon, does not get off the gear and go into the station. It is actually vented outside of the building. Some of those buildings that we have in the city, because some of the stations are so old, they don't have the power to actually service them correctly. So when this all came up, we knew we were going to save about $6,000 per unit. We're putting 2 in there. That's another $12,000 in savings. We're looking over the next year, the cable that will then now run from our current alarm operating building. We're in the process of putting together a contract to run that cable, and we'll try to pay for that in our current operating budget. So I think every time I speak with Deputy Galligan, we try to brainstorm a little bit more about where we can find savings now that are going to help us in a year or so, hopefully when we're moving into the building, in 10 years down the road. So that has been going on not only at CHA and KBA's in Suffolk's level, it has also been going on directly within our department. To just move on from that, I think one of the things that has been brought up and has been very clear about the two-way traffic. Just prior to me taking over as chief, Chief Williams put me on this committee because he wasn't going to be here for really even the groundbreaking, never mind the finishing of this building. When he did, I was more than happy to jump on board and jump right in. But some of the early discussions, whether it was be with the city planner, some of you folks who are on the committee, was we would not be able to move the current Station 1 anywhere else except in a close proximity. And when we looked at that, that was our best option was going to be where the old high school was. The problem with that was the two-way traffic. Right now, and I know I've explained this a couple of times when we've come before you, and I think it's important. If you look at the way the stations are laid out in the city of Brockton, if you look, we have one on the north side, North Main Street. We have one down in Campello, Station 2. We have the station downtown. We also have Station 6 on the west side and Station 4 on the east side. We also have Station 7 in the northeast quadrant of the city that services a huge area. One of our furthest response times right now, we're right on the cusp of the NFPA guideline of 6 minutes response times to the area of North Pearl Street and Reynolds Memorial Highway. If we were going to be moving into this building and we were going to have to go down Legion Parkway and then back up Pleasant past the old Station 1 or go down West Elm Street, and we ran all these tests, it was going to be close to 6 minutes and 30 seconds, way out of that initial, what we, by regulation, we're supposed to be responding in. Well, the NFPA is one thing, the National Fire Protection Association, but that would also affect potentially our ISO ratings, our insurance services organizations. That's one of the closest things they look at when they talk to us is about our response times. So two-way traffic was extremely important to me, as I'm sure it was to Chief Perez as well, because of the cruisers responding out of the police station. I think it's very important. We need to be laid out strategically. One of the biggest challenges of rebuilding of firehouses that I talk to chiefs all over the Commonwealth about is when they discuss strategy and where they're going. Perfect example is the city of Cambridge, who the chief up there has talked about how they pull out of stations in the back of buildings and alleys because the dynamic in the cities have changed since years ago when a lot of these stations were first laid down. So I think a huge component of that two-way traffic is life safety, obviously, but I think it also puts us in a position to change the dynamic of the downtown to revitalize a lot of that area. And that's as a personal quote, as a taxpayer on that end. The public safety component is as your fire chief. The last thing I'll leave you with, and I know that Joe Sullivan spoke of briefly, was the aspect of that building having to be secured in the hulking piece of metal that it is right now. The Norwood fire chief is a very good friend of mine, and they've run into problems with the stoppage of work at at Norwood Hospital. Norwood Hospital was going along, and then the whole Stewart situation came up, and they didn't have the money. They did not continue construction there, and they have run into problems on that property. I think some of the problems we're seeing in the downtown area right now could be greatly exacerbated by the potential of a big hulking building that we're trying to secure off with people potentially trying to get into that space. I know there'd be security and things of that nature, but that creates a major public safety concern because if this project stops, it stops where it is, and is it really safe for anyone to be there? A lot of you were at the topping off ceremony the other day, and I think a lot of us, due to the nature of my job, I'm in dangerous environments a lot, but I was very cognizant of where I stepped, where I went, where I didn't go because of the nature of what was going on, and that's not my familiarity. So I would be more than happy to turn this over to whoever was going to talk next, but again, I'll be here if there are any questions. Those are just some aspects I see as your fire chief.
Thank you. Yep. Next, Pat Hill.
Thank you, Joe. Oh. Somebody left their glasses up there.
One of the Sullivans.
I'm not going to be responsible for them.
I guess you weren't invited, but you showed up anyways, and I don't think there's any objections of having you.
I'm happy to leave.
No, you're perfect.
Good evening, councilors. So part of the public safety building site obviously was to accommodate two-way traffic. We've been at this whole process for about a year. And I'm just going to highlight some of the components of the project that were the expectations of the RFP based off of the selection that was made by the Traffic Commission for the traffic pattern. So initially the traffic pattern that was suggested was not accepted by the Traffic Commission. They accepted an alternative, which was Alternative 2. Alternative 2 changed the Warren Ave corridor from Spring Street all the way to Belmont Street to make it two-way. It also realigned Highland Street with Legion Parkway. So the project components of this project were obviously what I had just said, the realignment of Highland Street's eastbound and westbound approach to Legion Parkway, all new sidewalks with pedestrian ramps along both sides of Warren Ave, in some short sections, as well as Goddard Road and Highland Street, a bicycle lane for northbound bicyclists. We would still expect southbound bicyclists to use Main Street. A bus pullover for the BAT bus. We had to put a lot of consideration because there were several routes that do pick up and drop offs in that area, so there was a lot of coordination with the people over at BAT. An entirely reconstructed roadway in that section, an updated stormwater management plan, which would include rain gardens along Highland Street, all new traffic signs and pavement markings, all new traffic installations, at Belmont Street, West Elm Street, Frederick Douglass, Highland Street at Legion Parkway. All that equipment had to be consistent with the last project that was done in that corridor, which was Pleasant Street at Warren Ave. So we kept all that equipment black to be consistent with that so that we could reuse that equipment. New traffic signal detection cameras. All new signals with pedestrian equipment for push button and countdown pedestrian signal heads, traffic signal coordination for emergency vehicle preemption, new street lighting, all new trash cans, air quality sensors, pavement sensors, and trash can sensors so that the trash cans basically will alert us when they are full. And there'll be quite a few new tree plantings, which we plan on using what's called flex pave. It's a pervious pavement so that we don't have to go back, continually back and, eliminate the weeds like you see across the city. So to date, what's been completed, we've collected all the traffic data. The gas main, as everybody knows, has been replaced. We've replaced all the water mains on Warren Ave. We've also replaced all the water mains on Frederick Douglass, L Street, Green Street, and West Elm Street, and all those streets will be paved. That is actually not part of this this request today. That was done through the Enterprise Fund for the water. All that stuff, realistically, even though it's part of this, will not be a part of the request coming for you today. We've completed 75% plans. All our stormwater modeling has been completed. We got NEPA approval for the SMART grant that we applied for, and I'll explain that to you in a few minutes. We've had some issues coordinating with National Grid, but we seem to have gotten finally some response from them because there's a significant amount of pole relocations that have to happen. All of the appraisal services have been completed, and we're finalizing offers, and we'll have those in front of you next month. So where we stand to date for the cost, we had given you a cost in March of '24. Being, at 90% where we are now, we have a better feeling as to what we expect this total project to cost. Currently, we're looking at approximately $15.8 million. Some of the costs that we gave to you in March have come down. Some of those costs have gone up based off of some additions that have happened. And to date, for funding, we were able to secure a grant for $1.496 million with US DOT, the SMART grant. All the $1.3 million of that money will be going towards procurement of the traffic signal equipment, the air quality sensors, the trash can monitors, and the roadway pavement sensors. It also includes testing of all the equipment and a follow-up report. We received $500,000 from Mass DOT Complete Streets, which is going to be used towards the construction of the sidewalks and bicycle accommodations. And we've also received $35,000 towards a bat bus shelter that will be right out in front of the public safety building. Thank you.
And finally, we'd like to have Chief Perez just address the council.
Good evening, councilors. Mr. President, I concur with everything that Chief Nardelli said about the public safety aspect of the new building and would like to add. The new public safety building we're discussing tonight is not just a project. For all the departments here tonight, it's a necessity. As far as the police department, our current facilities are outdated and no longer fit the demands of modern law enforcement and emergency response. Every day, my officers and our emergency personnel work under conditions that are less than ideal, and I'm being kind in saying that, making it harder for them to do their jobs efficiently and safely. A state-of-the-art building will provide the space, technology, resources, collaboration we need to respond to calls for service more effectively. But beyond just the building itself, this project presents a unique opportunity to engage our community in a meaningful way. A new public safety building can serve as the hub where the community and our first responders come together, whether it's hosting public safety workshops, community meetings, or youth engagement programs. A modern facility will allow us to build stronger relationships with the people we serve. This building is about more than just meeting today's needs. It's about preparing for our community's future. I know that asking for additional funds is a significant request, but this is an investment in our residents, in our officers, in our firefighters, our IT infrastructure, and emergency management. We ask for your support in making this vision and legacy project a reality for the benefit of our entire community. Thank you.
Thanks.
Go ahead. And with that, I appreciate the council's patience to hear everything that we've discussed. At this point, we would like to take any questions and provide any answers and updates that you might need.
Thank you, Sullivan, and Sullivan. I have Minicello, Griffin. Well, let's go with Minicello first, and then we'll figure out this list.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for coming. I look at this project, and I really feel that I should be more excited about it, but I'm not. And I think everyone knows why I'm not, because to me, this is a 50% cost overrun. And nowhere could something like this, to me, happen but on a public project. The private sector, it just doesn't happen. So I have a couple questions in terms of the site preparation. Because obviously the foundation and the site are the cause of much of the cost overruns and the cost escalation. Now, I don't disagree that there will be cost increases. COVID brought, a unique set of circumstances, so I get that. Mm-hmm. I think we all get that. However, I think there are reasonable escalation costs, and I think there are unreasonable escalation costs. Again, I'm not a construction expert, but living in the city of Brockton, this place is built on rocks. Like I said before in the meeting, my dad had us putting up a fence in my yard, and guess what? We hit rocks everywhere. This wasn't like putting a fence in down the Cape, right through the sand. And we all knew, many of us knew, that the high school and the building, used to sit on part of this site. So I guess the question is, who's responsible for the due diligence in terms of testing the site? Did they do enough testing? Was the testing adequate? Because we're not talking about a reasonable cost escalation. To me, we're talking about an unreasonable amount of money that now, what choice does the city of Brockton have? Are we going to just leave a big, beautiful hole in the middle, in the heart of downtown? I don't think so. I don't want that. I think the community deserves and needs this building, this facility, but I think the community is getting saddled with a bill that is inappropriate. So I'd just like to hear, your thoughts. If you think I'm wrong, then tell me I'm wrong. But I just think that, the reasonable due diligence that should have been done, I don't see how so much ledge and pollution and contamination. This is a big mystery, I guess, or how this happens, without being discovered or being, factored into the original costs. I mean, this is, again, 50% cost overrun. Yes, some of it escalation for costs of materials and equipment and things like that. Yeah, I get that. But wow, if any of us were building our own home or an addition to our house, there'd be a lot of explaining to do why you can't finish the project, because a normal budget cannot withstand a cost increase like this. Again, like I said, but for public funding, we'd be in a lot of trouble here. And as one of the gatekeepers up here of the funding for the city and the taxpayers, with what's been going on, with certainly other avenues and other areas of the city, this doesn't bode well for the city of Brockton. It really doesn't. And, it's just, I just scratch my head saying, how does this happen? So there's sort of my big question in a nutshell.
Great.
Educate me and tell me, where I'm going wrong and where I might be on point.
Council, that's a great question, and that's something, the design team, CHA, and Suffolk, as we started to really encounter some of the cost escalations that we're actually dealing with. I can tell you the due diligence is that back in the day when the city imploded this building into the ground, if the building was abated at that time, we would be having a much different conversation related to the overall site. We were instructed that the school was imploded within that foundation footprint. We performed 15 borings and 9 test pits on that site. So it was a clear indication of where we stood material-wise. The difficulty is, and not knowing construction, and I'm going to give you a little insight on it, is typically there's an over-dig on any type of site to put in a foundation footing and the support structure that's needed for a building. Having a high school on the site, as you indicated, Brockton has ledge, and we knew that there was ledge there. Majority of that school, the as-built drawings and the construction drawings didn't indicate that any of the building was pinned on rock. Not one drawing showed that. We discovered that as we went through the demolition portion of this. So although, the borings and test pits, I can give you an example. In the town of Franklin, we ended up putting a high school on a athletic field within that site. We encountered almost 22 feet below a 40-foot strip of organic material on that field. One of the challenges is we did our borings. Our borings go down to a certain point naturally to find either groundwater, silt, degradation, or silt conditions associated with the site. What we found was, as we did the boring, we ended up capturing that material. What we found out after the fact, and this was all information once the site was located and we were actually moving forward with the construction of the school, is that 495 was built and all of the topsoil from 495 was given to the town of Franklin to make a football field. They had so much of it, they said, we're going to put a lot of soil down to no unbeknownst or any documentation, put a layer of the organic material 20 feet below before they put the topsoil on to make the field. It costs the town of Franklin an additional $11 million to remove that material after it was given to them to be able to build a new school. So getting out of the ground is one of the biggest challenges, without hesitation. Doing our due diligence to make sure that we perform the borings to figure out the soil conditions is paramount. There was a school that was currently in place, and it was active when we were going through the evaluation process. We did our test pits when we were able to, based on an unoccupied school, and we really couldn't get in to where the building was and the perimeter of it until the school was closed and relocated. That process in the design of this building continued as the program portion of it as we started to do the evaluation of the location around the building. At that point, once we took down the school, because we did an early package as we move forward with this, we found that part of the foundation that should have been 8 feet down was actually pinned to ledge. And that it wasn't documented, it wasn't an as-built drawing that would have shown that to the design team or the structural engineers. But it's a detail that we encountered because we were hopeful the parking garage was going to go there. Our excavation didn't need to go much further than that. And there is a typical overdig that happens during those foundation points. So that being said, that was part of the dilemma and the discovery as we moved forward. But it's even more so on why the site escalation occurred based on the contaminated material. It wasn't just the ledge was only a portion of it. The majority of that site, because of the cleanup that was necessary because of the imploding of that school, cross-contaminated soil. There's a level, the DEP created a level and a percentage of what soil is acceptable limits to be able to utilize on that site. As we extracted material, we had to test each of those piles individually and determine where the disposal would go, if and/or usability of that particular soil. We encountered much more cross-contamination than was originally stated and documented within that site. And that encountered a lot of the problem. The problem wasn't identifying the material and getting rid of it. That was a significant cost. But we also had to replace that material and put material back into that hole that you're describing that the city would be living with moving forward. So it wasn't just a matter of, digging down, finding the material, finding it's contaminated, finding a home for it to go. The cross transit of documentation to location is and documented for the city to protect their interests. We had to replace that material as well. And that encountered the ledge as well. The ledge material, fortunately, we were able to get rid of the ledge. We were able to utilize it and use it for bringing it back on site once we were able to break it up and utilize it for dense grade. So there was some cost savings there, but that was never on the drawings. It was never on the as-built, and that's why we encountered quite a bit of that. So it was a challenge not only for the city of Brockton. We inherited that site, obviously. We didn't know the extent at how they imploded that building and the level that they dug deeper. We went down almost 23 feet just to expose that material. And once we exposed it, we were obligated to clean it up.
I mean, I understand that. My feeling is, however, that some of that should have been known a lot sooner than when it was identified in the process, and it should have been identified during or close to when the cost estimates were occurring. Again, we knew that building was imploded. We knew that. So naturally, and we know that in these old buildings, there's asbestos. So I'm sure as part of the mix, there's asbestos. I mean, there's asbestos in buildings that we have right now, that so long as it's not messed with, touched, disturbed, it's been certified as within the acceptable health parameters that it can be there. Just make sure that you're not going to be disturbing it. But those buildings were, like you said, imploded. Or that building, what was it, A or B? I
believe B. But
I think it's A.
Yeah,
I think it's A, actually.
It's A, yeah.
But, I mean, so again, I wish I was more excited about this project. I really do. But really, what choice does the council have? Say no, and then we just leave this big, nasty mess of the heart of the city? I mean, that can't happen. But, do I have faith that this is the end of it? The way things have been going? No, I don't feel that I can, with all confidence, oh yeah, 48 million, we're done. Can I be confident with that?
Yeah, I would say you can be because of our due diligence since the discovery. Let me be clear, CHA is not happy about encountering all of the incidental costs associated with this project as well. I mean,
and I'm not trying to be flippant.
No, I know.
Saying, and the taxpayers aren't either, because guess who's footing the bill? And my next question for, my good friend, Mr. Clarkson, is this going to impact, the building of, or the renovations of Brockton High School? How is this going to, how is this $48 million going to factor into that? So that's going to be my follow-up question after you speak. But, I think every one of us up here, wants a beautiful public safety building. We all do. We see how dilapidated the police station is. We see, where, Chief Nardelli is downtown. I mean, no one's blind to that. We all wanted this, but I just feel that, that some of this is a little unreasonable, an unreasonable escalation and should have been anticipated. You're talking about 50%. 50% over budget, Not all of it's the site, some of it is, obviously the equipment and the furnishings but, again, I wish I was more excited about this, but I'm not. Because I'm concerned for the taxpayer and I'm concerned for the kids of Brockton in terms of Brockton High and having enough money to have that project done and what, how are we going to afford to pay for that? So... Yeah, I know I'm throwing up on this, but, I'm just concerned,
And I can appreciate your comments. Thank you.
So I guess I'll end with my question to you, Mr. Clarkson. How does this impact Brockton High if either a new school or a major renovation to what we have? Because we all need it and want it. And our bond rating, as my friend Councilor Lally just whispered to me.
Thank you. I'll answer that question in a couple of ways.
Right.
One, I did send you a estimated, and I stress the word estimated, payback schedule provided to us by our colleagues at Hilltop Securities. And it's estimated because you can pay back that debt in a variety of ways, and that would be determined at the time of issue. But what I asked them to do when they provided this schedule was we were suggesting borrowing, temporary borrowing for approximately 3 years, and then permanently borrowing. That's a deliberate strategy on our part to give us a few years to develop the sort of new growth and tax revenue that we would need to pay the permanent note. And so I am answering the question, Councilor, about the high school, but I'm trying to be deliberate and iterative about that so that you know what our plan is. So for the first couple of years, the annual cost of this would be approximately $1.6 million, and that would be paying the interest only on that. And so the hope is by the time the permanent debt, which also varies, and if you notice, it's approximately $3.3 million a year for about 15 years, and then it drops down to $1.9 million. That's because although it's in one loan order, it would be two separate debt issues, the 33 and the 15, because the maximum amount of time you can borrow is different for the building versus the road work. Before I get to the high school, one more point. This is the maximum amount that we would be authorized to borrow. It does not mean by any stretch that all of that money would be expended, particularly on the two-way traffic. You heard some outstanding efforts by our joint DPW finance team in obtaining some grant funds. We have been talking since the commencement of this project about using other funding sources, including some Chapter 90 funds and some of the already authorized bonded projects to do some of the paving. Those are still all options, and so we may be able to reduce that overall cost from 15 to something significantly less, but all of those are not concrete plans right now, so that's why we asked for that full authorization, but in the hopes that we could significantly reduce that. So I've said, as it relates to the high school, since we've started on that journey, that there would necessarily be a debt exclusion for that. When we talked about the $2.5 million for the feasibility study, I talked about it. We just recently talked as we start on the process to choose an owner's project manager, about having a public dialogue now that would result in a ballot vote probably 2 years from now to authorize the city's portion of that high school project. So what we do need to then, but ultimately to pay the 3.3 and then the $1.9 million a year for this project is sufficient new growth and increase in our property tax revenues to support that. So we do need to continue on the efforts that the mayor has undertaken and the council is looking at now for throughout the city to continue with the commercial and residential development to increase that new growth. We've been averaging about $1 million a year, but that's the overall increase to the budget. So for the next couple of years, we'll dedicate that to this, but we need to develop additional revenues to support the long-term impacts of this debt. So long-winded answer, but I wanted to give you the total picture of what we're looking at in terms of financing. And to be clear, my position remains that once we get to funding that high school renovation project, it will require a debt exclusion and a ballot vote.
And the bond rating too.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that portion of your question.
That was Councilor Lally's addition to my question, so I'll give him credit for that.
Well, he had the floor, you know.
Our bond rating remains unchanged at the AA2. I have noted at previous meetings, we were concerned that the school deficit issue would potentially result in a downgrade to our bond rating. And the mayor and I were able to report to you a few months back that that, in fact, was not the case. However, each time the city issues debt, we have what's called a ratings call with the bond rating agencies, and we review the status of the city's finances and all of the dynamics that are going on. So it's important that we remain vigilant and work closely with the schools so that they're not incurring any deficits. And so the rating for this will be determined at the time of issue. For the temporary debt, that we anticipate that would be sometime this fall. And we'll certainly keep you apprised of that process as it unfolds.
Let me just end by saying then that in Brockton, historically, a debt exclusion has never been well received by the city, by the taxpayers of the city of Brockton. And when this project was being contemplated, the public safety building, I was on the school committee and I was the vice chair. And even back then, we asked, how will this impact Brockton High, the new Brockton High? And at that time, basically there was no debt exclusion talk, so I have now major concerns about what is going to happen with that project if a debt exclusion is part and parcel of the necessary funding component. So.
And Councilor, these are discussions, and I'm glad to have it because I think we need to have these discussions starting now for a ballot vote that would not occur for another 18 months or 2 years. But it's important that we have this community discussion now. You are correct. Back then, we were hopeful that both the total cost of the high school project would be such and that the city's financial condition would be such that it would not require a debt exclusion, but our financial condition has changed profoundly, and we had significant reserves that we needed to spend to address the school deficit, and so I think we have to be realistic about the fact that our financial condition has changed significantly since we had those discussions a few years ago, and the cost pressures that Joe described related to the public safety building are also similar to those for a renovated high school. And the Mass School Building Authority will only reimburse that 80% up to a certain cost per square foot. So if the costs are escalated above that, we're responsible for 100% of those additional costs. And so we need to start having discussions now about what those impacts would be. I'm happy to attend any public forum to start talking about what the impacts might be on the individual taxpayer. It's a little early for that, but it's not too early to have those discussions so that the community feels as though they're part of it.
I agree, and also how it shows how important that meeting was that we had, Mr. Mayor, with regard to the fairgrounds and developing that project and helping that project find its way to a successful addition to the city, both from a stylistic and beautification type of project as well as tax revenue, much needed tax revenue for the city. So we'll all work hard on that one. And thank you. That was a very good meeting. Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. Mr. President, the floor is yours. Always yours, but the floor is yours. I'm done. Yes, thank you.
All right, I think I have Councilor.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for coming in. I wasn't on the council when this whole project started, but I do have some experience from being former chairman of the Redevelopment Authority. I understand that when you do projects of this scope and magnitude, there are going to be cost overruns. When you factor in the pre- and post-pandemic costs, that also comes into play. I would have liked to have a little bit more information on how the ledge was not found, but I'm not going to beat that like a dead horse. But what I do want to talk about, I spoke to the mayor the other day at the topping off ceremony. We both commented on it. The scope of that building, you really can't see from the street the way it's fenced off, okay? And I firmly believe that is going to change the whole downtown. And what I'm hoping happens is, it has to happen. It's not going to be hope. We have to get this done. We got to get control of the homeless population downtown, and we got to really increase the commercial development downtown and at the fairgrounds. Now, Mr. Clarkson, could you come forward, please? I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. I know we spoke numerous times about this, and I think you'd agree with me that the financial straits we find ourselves in, the only really way to get out of it, the sustainable independence of any type of debt, is to really aggressively increase our commercial tax base.
Yes.
Okay. The fairgrounds is a big part of it. We should fast track that, get that moving. That's undebatable. Downtown, I think we have a lot of potential downtown. I know a lot of developers have contacted me. I know they've spoken to the mayor. In fact, we've spoken to them together a number of times. They're willing to go, but we really have to, as a city and the council too, we have to set the table that Brockton is business friendly. We want to get developers in, and we want to make it as streamlined as possible. Now, whether that's going to be changing some ordinances or just becoming more user-friendly to the business community, whatever it takes. Because this public safety building, I think, is paramount. I mean, our police and fire, they risk their lives every day. They deserve a state-of-the-art building. The residents deserve a state-of-the-art building. The residents in this city also deserve a new high school. However, at the end of the day, we are the ones that are burdened with financing this. So I just want to make it clear to everybody tonight that our future, as far as these buildings go, is going to be tied directly to how well we do commercial development. I think everybody's on board with us, and that, to me, is the way we're going to bring this city forward. And I think it's imperative as a body, as a city, and working with the mayor's office to really push this forward. And we can do it, but I think it has to start today. And that's really all I want to say right now. I want to thank you guys for coming in. I appreciate you looking at the cost-saving measures now. I wish we maybe had a little bit more due diligence on the ledge, but I can't change history. But please just continue the project. I will be supporting this, and I just want you to contain your cost-saving measures also for the city. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, gentlemen. I just want to start off to say that I support the construction of the public safety complex. Our public safety personnel in the Brockton Police Department, Fire Department, BEMA, and IT, they deserve a state-of-the-art facility that provides them with the tools, the equipment, and the space necessary to effectively execute their job. And it's, the fire chief has been quoted as saying that the Station 1 outlived its usefulness in 1920. It's a great line, but it definitely encapsulates the need for a modern public safety facility. What's really upsetting is that due to what I consider a gross miscalculation of the cost of the public safety complex, this council was denied having all the information necessary to make a knowing decision at the time. And that falls on you, gentlemen. And so at this point, I want to try to better understand some of the due diligence process that led to this gross miscalculation. Some of it was brought up with Councilor Minicello's questioning, but I just have a few more questions. As stated, I can understand you know, a once-in-a-generation cost increase due to the pandemic and limited supply chains and everything that came into existence due to the pandemic. But what I'm concerned about is some of the issues that existed at the time. And I just want to talk about the ledge and the asbestos. Because from even what you said, sir, that it sounds like you have experience in dealing with unexpected or, you know, unusual circumstances, as the one you stated in your example. So the fact that you do have experience in that type of matter, I want to see how that was not applied in this situation. So you stated that you did do borings on the ledge. And so did any of those borings indicate that the ledge would continue along the property? Because I don't really understand what you mean when you say you did not know the extent of the ledge until the demolition of the building, because it existed at the time. You did borings, you identified that ledge was there. How was the footprint of the building kind of this unknown mystery, and because you didn't have access, you were unable to know the extent of the ledge on the property?
So, if you can't, it's not up right now. So, there was test pits and there were borings, and if you look at the drawing that we showed you, where it showed the significant amount of ledge that was encountered, was directly under Building B. There was an outcropping, to your point, there was an outcropping, and we identified that outcropping heading, I want to say it's west, but I can't say based on the perimeter and how it was set on the building. So we did identify that outcropping, and we put a cost associated with that based on some of the site conditions on there. Well, one of the difficulties that we have is that based on the foundation and the visual inspections that we did, normally ledges, you take it down another 4 to 6 feet underneath a building before you start bringing it back up, because you want compacted structural material underneath it. Having that school at the age it was, there was no as-built or construction. We couldn't visually see that ledge underneath the concrete floors at that time, and it was an occupied school. It wasn't like we were going to bring an excavator in that lower basement, cut a hole in the floor, and then try to do a boring in there until the school was moved and relocated. We went through 9 months of finding a new site before that school actually got taken down. So we tried to do as many boring and test pits around the perimeter that we could do to identify that without hesitation. And to my experience, coming out of the ground is the hardest. And part of those borings, we go down, certain borings go down certain depths, a little further than others, to identify that location. In the locations that we were doing, we didn't start to encounter that ledge until we got near the existing school that was still in place.
So you did borings at the perimeter. Did that give you any indication that there would be whatever the status of the ledge was under the building itself?
Only on that north cropping that was going out, or the west cropping, sorry. Around the perimeter area where the building got imploded, there was some rock. There wasn't any ledge at that point.
So up to that point, when you did those perimeter borings, you felt that the estimation that you presented to us was appropriate for the site plan work?
Based on assumptions, because we weren't finding the same outcropping that we did when we eventually got up to school. We didn't encounter or could assume that that outcropping went underneath the building, because normally that gets taken out while you do your foundations. That's standard construction, but back in the day, they didn't do it for convenience sakes, obviously. They drilled and pinned it instead.
What about when the building was unoccupied? Was there any opportunity to get in there?
Yeah, that's when we started. Well, first of all, we salvaged what we could off of the building, and then as we opened up part of the buildings, that's when we were able to explore it. But by then, we were already starting to take down the building. That's when it was discovered, and the extent of it was explored even more, and then we realized that it encompassed most of the foundation of that building.
What was the time frame between that discovery and coming before the council in February? Because it wasn't, for me, it wasn't until February, maybe a week before when your report was made, but prior to February, when did you understand the extent of the ledge?
I'm just trying to think of when we took down the building to the time that we actually were able to put some calculations associated with it. So we took that building down, it was the fall.
Yeah, late summer into fall.
Yeah, late summer into fall. And that's when it was discovered. At that point, we did some more borings to determine the outcropping and the actual extent that we needed to go down. I would say probably 2 to 3 months before we got all the calculations.
Okay, so fall, you're saying 2 to 3 months prior to February?
Yep.
Okay.
And it was a process as we moved forward, because we were selectively demoing that building as we went through, because we couldn't just take it down all in one shot. It may have seemed that way looking at it, city, but it was done strategically so that, we didn't have cloud masses affect the residents and businesses in that area and not affect the removal of that building.
All right. So you're stating that it was an assumption that wasn't reasonably made prior to taking the building down. And again, what frustrates me is I went back to review the December 21st, 2020 presentation. At that time, you had a gentleman, Mr. Marks, I believe.
Richard Marks, yeah.
Yeah, before us. And man, he was beaming with confidence, looking at that presentation that he made us. In fact, he stated that his calculations took into account any possible inflation that could occur. That was one of the things he stated at that time. He also had extreme confidence, stating that at the end of this process, there was a high likelihood that there would be money returned to the city. And so, the confidence in the presentation is another issue that, that I'm having some trouble swallowing.
At that time, and I can tell you, and I was nauseous over this situation, as well as we encountered some of the costs. I mean, there were conversations late into the evening that we would have internally, and then, going through our team to come up with, variations or calculations to come up with a reasonable resolution to try to resolve this. Richard Marks at the time, he made some assumptions, not knowing what the market was going to do. Because if I had this crystal ball, we would be having a different conversation right now. Because I would have been telling you, what's coming and where we would have been at. But I didn't, unfortunately. And those assumptions, Richard Marks was a cost estimator long before he became an OPM back in the 80s. And in his past experience prior to selling his company, obviously to CHA, he had great knowledge and experience to make judgment assumptions with what would be calculated on past experiences with similar sized buildings that we've done, very size similar to what you encountered with the city of Brockton. He couldn't have forecasted what we encountered for cost escalation based on that time frame. I couldn't do it, and I know he would. There's no way he wouldn't. And there's many other towns and cities that encountered that same circumstance. I can tell you that much.
Talking about the asbestos, can I get a better understanding? So obviously building B was imploded. There was some understanding that obviously you knew that asbestos was present in the building, right? Can I assume that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then you did some testing on that site. You said you went 25 feet deep in your...
Different boring depths that they went through to determine. But so the level of extent of contamination that would have happened within the soils doesn't happen just by, taking a soil sample to say, all right, there's asbestos in that, and there's other type of hazardous material in another portion of it. As the material was getting excavated and moved, it had to be tested because we have to test by regulations to determine what's in that soil because that determines where it's going to be disposed of. So as we determined that location, there were 3 or 4 contaminants based on that age of the building that we made assumptions that were part of the construction. We wouldn't have known what type of material. I wouldn't have thought all of the lead off of some of the paint and the wood was just left. Normally when you knock down a building, you take a lot of the wood material, dispose of it, and the hard portions of it, I call it the stone portion of it gets imploded into the building. It got all buried at that time. So there was a cross-contamination of that material, which escalated the location of where it could be disposed of.
So there was no records on file to state exactly what materials were present and then imploded. So then when you did your borings, you're saying that you did not find that cross-contamination between, let's say, the lead and the asbestos?
We found dissimilar materials as the borings occurred. Until we pulled it out and determined the type of material, that's where the numbers and the estimates started to come in as to how much money it would be to try to remove. What we didn't understand, and the borings finally got us to realize that, and test bits, is that it went far outside of the foundation location that the building was imploded on. So there was a cross-contamination of the entire site around that foundation, and not necessarily within the perimeter of that building.
So you only tested the perimeter of the building and were unaware of additional contaminations outside that perimeter?
When we took tests around the outside perimeter of the foundation, we started to go outside a little further to see the extent of the cross-contamination that was occurring. And we wouldn't have been able to do that. We did that early on to see the exposure, and that started to say, okay, it's a bigger problem that we're at, and how big is it going to be? So we went even further once the school was emptied out and we were able to actually relocate the students.
So that was all done post prior to 2020, when basically you guys came before us and told us what this was the cost estimate.
2020 and 2022, all that occurred.
Was there any expectation at that time that the contamination would be at a larger extent than what you originally assumed?
We didn't anticipate it going past what we had identified within that building that got knocked down.
Was that a reasonable assumption to make, that it was?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Past experience where we've had buildings that have been knocked down, where we've experienced it, it typically is within a certain parameter. And we always take, even Richard Marks had done some escalation of extending that area just for coverage. We didn't know it was the material was commingled with a lot more material on site.
And then due to the type of material, that depends on the disposal facility?
That's correct.
And then so it was assumed that you could dispose it closer due to the type that you understood it to be, and then as these additional cross-contaminations became evident, it had to go to a further away place.
Right. Once the results come back, it gives us a different location of where it has to be disposed of.
Are these understandings usually completed prior to your cost estimate? Meaning, your full understanding of the contamination on the site? Is that usually, do you usually have a full understanding prior to making the cost estimates?
Try to have a understanding of all of the materials there, but as we excavated the material, there were different levels of material as we moved forward, as we started to excavate I call it the dirty dirt and the material to get rid of. We started to separate it and had to test each of those piles independently to see what cross-contaminants existed.
All right, I appreciate that. On the two-way traffic, I had one question regarding the two-way traffic. I know this is not necessarily your purview, but from my understanding of the cost estimates for the two-way traffic were essentially put in the contingency. I remember that as being part of the 2020 presentation. There was a discussion as to the two-way traffic, and it was proposed that the two-way traffic, the funding for the two-way traffic would essentially be what was line itemed under our contingency line.
Yeah, and that's fair to say. What we initially, when we talked about two-way traffic patterns, was around the perimeter of the site for basically discharge and dispatch of the apparatus emergency vehicles. Once Chief Nardelli and Chief Perez really started to look at the overall direction at how that apparatus had to go, along with Bill Hill and Chief Galligan, looked at, like, it was more than just Warren Avenue, and it was more than just, the backside of how they access the public safety building. So that's when a full traffic analysis and study was done, and that's what extended some of the two-way traffic and traffic flow from the public safety building to where it extended to that $15.8 million.
I remember there was discussion, I believe it was from you, Commissioner Hill, that you stated that the original estimate was, as per the contingency, and then there were multiple scenarios presented to the Traffic Commission, and the Traffic Commission then chose a different scenario than what was initially proposed.
Yeah, that's correct. The initial proposal, I think the cost estimate came in based on MassDOT standards at the time at $3.9 million. That was strictly to convert Warren Ave, a small portion of Warren Ave to two-way, which would have been from West Elm to Legion Parkway.
Was the Traffic Commission made aware of the cost differences between the scenario presented and then their scenario chosen? Were they aware of the cost difference?
That was not part of the presentation. The presentation was based off of response time. As you know, there are members of the fire department and the police department that sit on the Traffic Commission. After a pretty detailed review, they actually had to come back several times and present us with several different options. Cost was not part of the decision-making process, though.
I would wonder why wasn't that issue before the Traffic Commission prior to the borrowing or the cost estimation of, what it would cost, so we had a full understanding of what the two-way traffic would be prior to our borrowing?
I could not answer that question.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Hill. I guess some additional questions for Troy, if you wouldn't mind answering a few things. Mr. Clarkson, again, going back and reviewing some of the tape, both at the groundbreaking and at the prior Finance Committee meeting, at that time, we were celebrating that the public safety complex and the borrowing would not require any raising of taxes, right? That, we've been talking about this over the last few years, that we have that mountain of debt coming off the books from a prior pension obligation bond borrowing that's coming off the books, that this public safety borrowing would seamlessly kind of come in and keep the line steady instead of growing, kind of causing a higher debt load that, that potentially would affect our taxpayers. How does this new borrowing, obviously we're no longer on that straight debt management line. I would imagine this is going to spike. What's the relation of this spike now with our taxpayers and their need to further fund this?
We are not requesting a debt exclusion for this, so the overall impact will still be within the city's levy limit. How we manage that, of course, is critical. So that goes back to what Councilor Griffin was saying and what I had said about the need for creating additional new growth and additional tax revenue. The reason why our strategy is to use temporary borrowing for a few years is precisely to develop the kind of additional revenues we'll need to be able to support this additional debt load. There are other strategies. Kevin mentioned the sale of the existing police station. I've mentioned to you a couple of times over the years about creating a capital stabilization fund, and as we offload some of the properties, particularly the police station, that will be very valuable. One of the strategies we could employ is to put that money in a capital stabilization fund and then draw on it to support the budget for increased costs as we move forward. That's a limited strategy, but it's certainly a strategy that we could employ. So in order to afford this without a significant impact on our operations, which would be the consequence, we would have to develop sufficient additional new tax revenues to support that $3.3-ish million a year, which is the highest cost that this would be.
So if we're not, and we all expect there to be new construction in the city and recouping some of these, increasing our revenue through both commercial and commercial development in our city. And I, as Councilor Griffin said, I support the development of the fairgrounds. I think it's prescient at this point that we're lucky that we did not proceed with purchasing the fairgrounds. So I'm glad that decision was made by this council not to move forward with that. Where was I? Oh, so if as you stated, there will be some expected growth, but essentially on the opposite side of that, it would be a postponement of current capital projects or operation, a reduction of operational costs in the city, meaning that because we have a higher debt load, and some of that will be filled in by new growth, but basically the rest of that would probably be filled in with a delay of immediate capital projects. I mean, that would be fair to assume.
No, I wouldn't necessarily say that, because for instance, I mean, some of the estimates that we're seeing with some of the potential development over the next several years are in the several millions of dollars, numbers exceeding this. And so
but there's no shovels in the ground right now, so.
No, absolutely, and I'm not proposing that there are. But I said a few minutes ago, and I'll say again, the long-term ability to support this additional debt must come from either new growth and additional tax revenues, or a reduction in spending elsewhere. The high school project aside, we need to continue to have discussions about that, as I said a few minutes ago.
Right, and just on that, on the high school, I think there's breaking news tonight where you stated that basically the only way to move forward with that project would be via debt exclusion. And as Councilor Minichiello stated, the conversation prior to that was that there was a very high likelihood we would not need it. Now it sounds like that's the only way to actually move forward with that project.
Yeah, I have said that I would respectfully disagree, Councilor. I wouldn't say that it's breaking news. I have stated that publicly, that Councilman Michello was correct that our position then was that we were hopeful it would not require one, but I have certainly said publicly since then that my position is that it will require a debt exclusion.
Yeah, but you put that in writing and it was a guarantee.
And I guess at this point, that's all of my questions, Mr. Chairman.
There you go.
You want to take it? There you go.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you.
Go, Councilor Darrencourt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to both of you. Obviously, you know, I'm going to try to keep this short. It's getting late, and I don't want to go, you know, in circles. So $48 million, you know, is definitely a tough pill to swallow. Mm-hmm. Now, the question is, what are the options? And I don't think we have any. Well, we do, but I guess some of them would be to move forward and some of them to stop, right? And the situation is very complex in terms of explaining this to the taxpayers. And at the end of the day, you know, I wouldn't be able to feel comfortable with myself if I did not acknowledge that, you know, $48 million is not a joke. But do I believe that we need a public safety complex? We do. And I think, you know, we do have an opportunity to have that. But what I hope that I don't see again, obviously the last time that you guys were here, you know, I said that for the record, I would support that, and that does not change. I will, you know, I will vote in favor of this, but for the sake of my vote, you know, what I would like to ask again, even though some of my colleagues, you know, stated it, I hope that there will not be any additional cost to this, because if we do, that would be a disaster. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, you know, after coming back requesting, you know, $48 million, and I hope that there will be no request for a penny, because obviously, you know, we are not campaigning, there's no election, this is not like a campaign speech, but, you know, for a city of ours, given the situation that we have been dealing with in terms of finance, it's very tough to go out there and try to explain to somebody that, you know, these are the costs that we did not expect. And the question is, how could you possibly did not expect to oversee a $48 million? And, you know, I'll do my best to explain to them the situation, even though I'm not an expert in construction, but I can try my best to navigate through it. Yep. But, you know, I think it's fair to say that, you know, we do need that public safety complex, and I think the police department, the fire department, BEMA, and of course, you know, all the necessities department that will be there deserve that. And of course, you know, I've been, you know, to this police station multiple times, not for any wrongdoing, but just to observe it. But I think that it is time for them to move out of there. But, you know, sitting here listening to my colleagues, you know, some of them express frustration in terms of what's going on, which is rightfully so, because at the end of the day, you know, we as taxpayer, we're gonna have to pay that bill. But I believe in this project. You know, I think you know, it's a wonderful opportunity for the city of Brockton to, you know, showcase something wonderful. I am very excited about the outcome of it, and I think it's gonna be a nice opportunity, especially for this area, which at one point was dead. And as I was driving, you know, down here this afternoon, I passed by it. Unfortunately, I was not able to make, you know, that meeting recently in regard to touring it. I can see that, you know, the building is coming to life, but. Mm-hmm. You know, because of that excitement and, of course, you know, the beautification of it, that does not remove, you know, the possibility of being questioned by, you know, the voters. I am one of those here that always ask the questions, but I think, you know, the last time that you guys were here, we had a conversation, man to man, we spoke about it, and in terms of, you know, the possibility of not coming back. And tonight, on the record, I would like to ask you guys, the two of you, or anybody that can make that, because that we will not come back for any money. And if you do, I don't think the city council will take it easily. And I would hate to say that, you know, not having enough money is part of the reason this project did not move forward. And I think the sentiment is, you know, through all of us. I don't think any of us has anything against the project, but I think, you know, this unexpected cost, I mean, it's possible. It's part of life, right? COVID, you know, 2024, and obviously, you know, some of us didn't expect the outcome to be like this, but we are facing the best way to put it, we are at a crossroad, and the question is, do we stop or do we move forward? I think we should move forward. I think the city of Brockton has the ability to get back on track, and of course, I believe that the voters, if not the resident, will be able to understand. But truly, like I said, I am in favor of this 100%. I made my commitment to you guys that will not change, but that does not, prevent me from acknowledging it. I'm not gonna go back and forth saying this, but I think it's necessary for me to hear it both from you and you, that you guys will not come back to request any additional money, because that would be very problematic for me. And if you try to answer that question, I'm okay with it. But I would greatly appreciate if you guys can make this, promise to me at least that we will not come back here to ask for any additional money.
I appreciate everything that you said. As much as I love spending the evening with every one of you, my next visit is hopefully to celebrate when we're going to have a ribbon cutting on this building. One of the assurances I can give you is that we're working with a quality contractor, Suffolk Construction, and we did it under CM at risk. They partnered with the city of Brockton to build this building. At the end of the day, and we're at a point where we're getting closer to a gross maximum price. That's a guaranteed gross maximum price of what this building is going to cost. So based on the forecast that we've done and the cost implications that we've incurred and the cost cuts that we've made, I feel confident enough in front of you to say, well, I'm not coming back in front of you and asking for more money.
So can you make that statement?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to piggyback off of Joe's statements, I believe when we were here in February, I gave a specific update on the building. Just to draw the distinction, the 48 million is for two separate projects. The building,
I understand that.
Two-way road.
Mm-hmm.
When we came here in February, I reported roughly 34.5 to 35 million dollars. That number has come down over the past 7 or 8 months to closer to 33 million. We continue to work on that to reduce costs. And I think also, as Joe has mentioned, getting out of the ground, clearly the hardest part of any project. We're roughly 40% into construction, and our change orders to date are a credit, so negative $200,000 to $250,000. So we feel very, very confident on the record that we will not be coming back to you for any additional funding.
Excellent. I mean, it's like I just want to sit here and pretend to be an expert on building. I have no clue. I mean, obviously some of the, terminology that you guys have been using tonight are foreign to me. But one thing that I know for sure is that, like I said, I mean, I'm excited about this building. I am really are, and I think that we do have an opportunity here to build something that will last for generation. And I think, as a young person myself, I think that building will be part of our legacy here. But at the same time, we do have a responsibility to making sure that when we spend the money, we spend it accordingly. So for me, I don't have a spending problem. Obviously, you guys were here tonight listening to the conversation that we are having. As long as the money is being spent accordingly, I'm okay with it. And I guess having something like this in the city, having that public safety complex is necessary. I would never say otherwise. But the fiscal responsibility, I think, it is something that we should be focused on. And at the end of the day, I trust your judgment. Hopefully, like I said, we will not need any money, and that would make me very happy. But we have no options than moving forward. So I cannot wait for the outcome of this building. I cannot wait to see the fire departments there. I cannot wait to see the police department there. I cannot wait to see any department there. But what I'm not exciting is coming back and ask for more money, even if that is a penny. So with that being said, I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And
thank you.
Care. Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Texera?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Good evening. I think we all on the same page. Brockton is on the same page. But when it comes to money, everybody worries about, how you're going to pay for it, when you're going to pay for it. I got a question. When you put the bid out, how many companies they showed up to put the bid? It was...
So that's a good question. I would say
Yes.
eight general contractors.
Are you talking about general contractors or trade bids?
Yeah, the general contract bid.
Yeah, so this project was it was done Chapter 149A, Construction Manager at Risk, which is different than your standard hard bid, design bid, build 149. Under construction manager at risk, we advertised for construction managers who would be building this. Suffolk obviously won the project. I think we had between 5 and 7 proposals. We interviewed 4, well-known, certainly credible contractors in the Commonwealth and Suffolk. They were the top-ranked firm that we selected, and we negotiated contracts. We continued to work with them. They reviewed the design documents, and then eventually we went out to bid for trade contractors. So it was publicly bid for the trade contractors, I believe, in November or December.
So we pre-qualified the file subcontractors, and we qualified based, requested general contractors to submit their qualification in their teams. We interview them based on their qualifications in the team. We select them, and then we take the file subcontractor values of 18 file subcontractors, and we marry the general conditions with the general contractor, and they sign all those subcontractors on as the general contractor for the project.
And just to be clear, we pre-qualified over 100 trade bid contractors, and they were all given the opportunity to bid on this. And I don't know what the exact number, I don't know if the folks from Suffolk have specific, but certainly probably received, 50 to 80 trade bids between all the, is that fair? Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
There was an average of 4 or 5 subcontractors for each trade bid.
4 or 5 subcontract, and they were the lowest bid, or?
Yeah, those are the lowest bids. But we also take the lowest bid and make sure that we de-scope them. And what that means is that we sit with each file subcontractor, make sure that their subcontract bid is conclusive of the work that we proposed. So,
Yeah, because you got the other contract that probably bid 10, 15% higher, but with the increase of it's public safety, how much it's going to cost us. You probably push the other company out, say, you know what, your bid was 10, 15% higher, so we're going to go with this.
right. And there's options. I mean, we don't necessarily, we don't necessarily have to take the lowest bid based on what's going on there. We want to make sure we have the qualified and the best price for the overall project. One of the challenges that we had, and we've been beating it to death on the pandemic, but there was a fear factor, and I tried to explain this. I believe I gave a little explanation. I'll give you file subcontractors used to have 15 electricians that would be employed in their company. During the pandemic, it dropped down to 7, but they were still bidding jobs for an 18-month or 24-month period. What they realized is that it took them time and a half to have those same 7 guys finish the project within that timeline, or they encountered liquidated damages. So it created a fear factor amongst a lot of file subcontractors and general contractors. So they escalated and added a lot more value to cover the timelines that they were trying to do. We encountered that, and we de-scoped every one of those file subcontractors based on the timelines to make sure that they had the staff that accommodated the construction needs to complete the project within those timelines. So there was a lot of work done to make sure that we de-scoped those contractors to fit the overall costs that we're showing right now. That's why I feel comfortable enough to say we will not be back for more money based on those. So.
We took a tour last Wednesday. When it's all said and done, it's going to be a beautiful building, especially for the fire, the police, the FEMA, and the IT. And the city really needs, we all got to come together, and there's no look back. We got to move forward.
Yep.
This is, like the mayor says, this is a city of champions. There's no going back. We need to move forward. I got a question to CFO. Thank you, Mr. CFO. We're going to go and borrow $48 million. What's the rate I know on the $98 million it was 2.5. On this $48 million, what's the rate that we're going to be paying for them? If you got an idea.
Yeah, we have an idea. It's an excellent question, Counselor. So in the proposal that I sent you, we're estimating, and this is based on lots of factors, it's the market and right now our bond rating. We believe that we can borrow the money, the temporary money for a couple of years at 3.5%. That is a going rate for temporary public debt right now. And we believe, and this is based on not just my opinion, but input from our financial advisor as well, we're estimating that the permanent debt would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 4%.
4%. If we knew what we know now, when we went for 98 million at 2.5, we should have bought 150 million.
Hindsight is indeed 20/20, Councilor, yes.
Yeah. And we would have saved ourselves ton of headaches, make a bunch of people happy, and not get many people upset. But it is what it is, you know.
Right.
And we just got to work together, make sure that 2025, the project's supposed to be July 2025.
That's what they're striving for right now.
That's what they guaranteed.
That's what they get, you know, and, well, we'll all be there to celebrate. I don't think we'll think about the 48 million at that time, but we'll think about celebrate a new building, especially for the fire, for the police. That's way, way past due, and FEMA and the IT. And, you know, we got to swallow it.
Thank you.
Thank you for being
Thank
here.
you,
Thank you,
Councilor.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Fawa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm looking at this a little differently. I'm not happy about having to borrow more money. But I'd prefer to do it this way. I think if we had borrowed, let's say, 148 million years ago, we probably would have spent up to that level. And I'd rather start off with a more conservative figure and then find out, unfortunately, that there have been cost escalations on the way, but we can document them, we can discuss them, we can divulge them to the public, and we can justify the added borrowing. Now, politically, it may not be fun, and none of us like to tell the taxpayers that we're going to have to borrow more money for a project, but I'd actually rather do it this way. I think we would have made, I think if we had borrowed that 148, we would have spent up to it. And I don't necessarily say we wouldn't have gone through those cost analysis and cost adjustments, but I think there would have been less pressure to do so, maybe less impetus to do that kind of analysis. So I'm almost glad it's going this way. And for the project itself, just putting aside the 4 departments that are going to be there, it's in the core area of the city where the population is the most dense. It's right across the street from the elderly high-rise or the Brockton Housing Authority building. It's certainly going to dynamically change the downtown area. From an economic development standpoint, I think we're showing that the city is investing in its own future. We're not sitting back just assuming that developers will come in and put up apartment buildings or commercial properties. So, and lastly, as a resident, you know, it's a nice psychological boost to see something like this happen. Some of us fall into the doldrums of we live in an older urban center. The shoe industry has passed us by. We haven't had a boxing champion for years. You know what? We're doing something. We're turning the corner. We're making a statement about Brockton. So I understand my colleagues' angst about borrowing the money, but I am excited about this. I think for a lot of right reasons, this is going to really transform Brockton, transform the downtown area. A couple of questions for Mr. Joe Sullivan. In a perfect world, we would have identified the site, and then we could have immediately gone on that site and done everything we need to do with test borings and go through buildings, and we would have had plans that were correct in our engineering department. The fact of the matter is, because the school was occupied, there was quite a delay between doing what we might want to have done and what we were allowed to do. Am I correct?
That's fair to say.
All right. So, and that clearly might have changed the amount of money that had to be expended once we did the test borings. And
so that's a two-part question, and so I'm going to give you 2 answers to it. The first one is typically, you know, there's site evaluations to determine, you know, what the best site was, and Chief Nardelli and Chief Perez basically reiterated that based on response times, that was the location for the station to go. If the site was vacated, we would have probably put together an early package. And what that means is that we would have done a early demo package, an early site preparation package to identify any unknowns or any inconsistencies with what the assumptions would have been to build that building. And that would have been probably a knockdown of that building, identifying, you know, the contaminants on there. And you, no matter what, you would have paid for the cleanup of that site as part of the base bid if it was discovered right from the beginning, versus what we're finding right now. I can tell you Suffolk through Bernago, the site contractor, efficiently and effectively, because we brought them in early at the 60% mark, efficiently and effectively not only identified the material, but came up with a plan to ratify it in a quick manner. So I don't think personally that you paid an escalation that would have been exorbitant because we found it after the fact. We found it as we were going through that, and we expedited the process. So normally, if the site was picked, as you just indicated, we would have done probably an early site package, all of those borings and test pits, and identified some of the contaminants that everybody's been talking about that should have been caught. No matter what, whether we caught them early or caught them now, we still would have encountered this cost without hesitation on this site. The differential is we would have picked up some time based on an early package to have Suffolk maybe complete that building that much sooner if the site was vacated.
By the way, the asbestos wouldn't have been in the interior of the school, would it? Because it'd be most unfortunate if we relocated a program there, we put the key school there.
Asbestos is permissible in a school district that's occupied. So that's not unheard of to have in the existing school. There was abatement that needed to be done within that school once we vacated it. The differential is that most districts typically have a plan through the state and identify any materials, and it has to stay either intact or encapsulated, and it can maintain and be safe for students to be in a school of that nature. But that original school that we had to knock down did need to be abated prior to the demolition of that building. And we did it the way it should have been done effectively, and the material utilized to remove from that site could be disposed at normal landfills.
All right, and I guess my last question is just based on living and seeing all of the prices to go up for automobiles, food, pharmaceuticals, prescription drugs, houses in Brockton that used to be $300,000 now are selling for $750,000. My head spins sometimes when I see these figures. You cover a wide area, your company, including my old high school down in the Cape that's, I guess, is still...
That's it. Yep.
Yeah, that's, I guess, is going through a building project, or maybe it's complete. Has this escalation of costs happened elsewhere based on your experience, or are we in the norm? Are we out of the norm? Or, give me an honest assessment of where do you think we are?
You are not alone, I can tell you that much. Prior to 2019, we did Bridgewater Mitchell Elementary School. Prior to the pandemic, we saved $6 million on the overall bid because general contractors at that time were bidding projects aggressively. Once the pandemic happened, I've done 9 to 12 projects since 2019, and every one of them has encountered cost escalations on costs and goods through 2019 to 24. And I'd say out of the 9 districts, 6 of them had to go back for additional funds because no one could have anticipated the cost increases, if that gives you any
And that's the Mitchell
flavor.
and Bridgewater you did?
Yep.
The new Mitchell and Bridgewater?
Yep.
Okay, well, again, I hate to borrow that kind of money. It is substantial, but I really think on balance, the residents are going to get something that will be of great significance for the next half century and beyond. And I join the biweekly calls, and I know how meticulous you've been. I know how analytical you've been. And I know all of the questions that have been thrown at you during those meetings. And there's just been a very good faith effort to do everything right for the city of Brockton. And as a resident and as a counselor, I thank you for that.
And we'll continue to do so. Counselor, thank you.
And I'm not afraid to speak up if I see you.
I know you're not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. I guess before we go to, I had everybody. Anybody else wants to? Counselor Castro.
Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen. What a night, huh? There's no question we're over a barrel, aren't we? And that's a terrible shame, because with so many people watching, and the number has gone up more than $30 million, plus roadway work. I mean, it's just, I don't even know how to characterize it. Disappointing, incredibly disappointing, troubling. And yet, we owe this to our community. We owe this to our public safety people. And I get that totally. I've been to all the places where they work now, and they deserve better. All of them do. I'm wondering, but it seems wrong about the asbestos and the ledge. It seems like somebody dropped a ball somewhere. And so I'm wondering, who did the pre-construction survey?
Did the, what was that?
Pre-construction survey?
So there was the pre-construction survey is typically usually hired by the architect initially to determine some of the existing conditions. When you say drop the ball, unfortunately, the city could have avoided a lot of this if they would have done the abatement prior to this school being demoed, without hesitation. We inherited that portion of it, and as I indicated earlier, if I had my forensic crystal ball and could have visualized the extent it was there, we would have identified it, and we would have at least encapsulated it within the specifications and construction documents to have it abated appropriately. But coming, as Kevin indicated, coming out of the ground is one of the most difficult portions of it. No matter, until you physically excavate the soil and start doing soil analysis, there's no way that the analytical pre-construction survey would have identified it. I can tell you that much.
So the original borings did show contaminants?
The borings that we did showed some contaminants within the perimeter of that foundation. We went outside that parameter to make sure that we were encapsulating or capturing any other contaminated soils that might have commingled. And at that point, we started to identify and quantify what that impact was. And we were basically chasing the dirt at that point.
But you knew about this. Like, I see the boring log dated July of '23. We had the groundbreaking in July of '23. Why didn't we know about these additional costs?
You didn't know the extent because you couldn't, you identified material. So there would be pockets, and I'm going to give you an example. There would be a pocket of 6 feet of contaminants, then clean soil. Another 4 feet of contaminants, clean soil. You can't separate that in a manner where you're not going to cross-contaminate. You can scratch it, but what happens on the contaminated material where it hits the next layer, and then you got to scratch. So all of it had to be identified. All of it had to be analytical to where it was going to go. It wasn't as simple as saying, yes, that all of that soil is dirty, because it all wasn't, but there was pockets of clean and dirty soil that needed to be set. It was a process. It wasn't, to just say, it would have been easier for me to just say the entire site's dirty, let's just make a 25-foot hole across the page, get rid of it and bring new. But that wasn't how it was done.
Can you estimate what percentage of the site you removed?
Entire construction portion of it. Yes. I can't. I could quantify that for you. I don't have that.
We can work with Suffolk and the site contractor to get you specific. I could throw a number of 50 to 70%, but we can get you specific data.
Yeah, that would be interesting to know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But I'm just wondering, why did you start construction if you knew the costs were going to change?
Why did I start construction portion of it? Because every month that goes by, there's significant escalation.
Because of the cost of construction?
Oh, absolutely. So, we were, on an average, prior to the pandemic, if you average 2.5% a year, we were showing 13%. That's significant on an overall budget on a $98 million project. And the longer we waited, the more money we were just putting into escalation rather than into the program and building.
So you don't see any culpability for the HAZ engineer or the asbestos surveyor?
We did analytically look at all of those locations, and they identified it appropriately. There wasn't any information within the city or until we did the borings and test pits to show the cross-contamination that occurred. So I couldn't hold someone accountable until we knew what the information was.
So you're bouncing this off what the city knew or should have told you. But, I mean, city personnel changes.
I'm saying that-
records get wet. Isn't that why we have experts going out?
And that's the reason why we did the test pits and borings to figure out the soil gradation and the contamination.
Okay. And what is the gross, someone mentioned earlier, the gross maximum price? What is that?
It's so basically, the gross maximum price is what the total cost of construction to construct the building is for the general contractor. He takes all of the filed subcontractors, all of the non-filed subcontractors that'll be covered under the general contractor, the general contractor's general conditions and scope for supervision, and that's the gross maximum price that'll cost the city of Brockton.
So what's the number?
Based on the number that we asked, it's 134 plus 98, so 132.5 plus 98 million.
Sorry, yeah, so do you want just construction?
I've got the project budget comparison in front of me. Yes, for the project.
For construction,
Yes.
that's 93 million bucks, I believe. 92.
The building itself is roughly 92, and the garage component is, 14 to 15 million dollars.
Yeah, that's one of the papers that we gave you. It's 92 million for the building and 14 for the garage.
Right. Well, I'm concerned because I know the reputation of Suffolk Construction. They have a reputation of returning significant change orders. They've had multiple lawsuits about it, and I don't want us to get caught in that. And these numbers are just so high, despite construction costs going up pre- and post-COVID, okay? Despite all of this, it's gone up so much. I'm just amazed. And we're over a barrel, aren't we?
So you point to change orders and the general known for them. I can tell you, I've worked with Suffolk on a number of different projects through my career, and, every project is going to have change orders. To say that drawings are 100% would be irresponsible of me. There's always going to be changes. But I can tell you, working with a CM and having worked with Suffolk in the past, they do a thorough evaluation of every subcontractor that puts in a change to make sure it's valid before they submit it to us. But we go one step farther than that. We have in-house cost estimating within our process, and KBA, we sit down with their group with any change that comes through and evaluate scope, costs, and time associated with it. And it's not rubber stamped. There's not one change order that's ever get rubber stamped to move forward. It gets exhausted to nauseating feats to sit down with the group and go and push. There's change orders that sit out there maybe, sometimes 3 weeks because there's a back and forth of where we feel it should be based on where the subcontractor or the general may be suiting. But they do their due diligence before they submit it to the owner for costs associated with it.
And just to add to that, one of the reasons we went construction manager at risk is typically you have a partner and not just someone constructing a building, and historically the change orders are much lower than a standard design bid build. As I mentioned before, that we're about close to 40% construction, so you would expect to see at least some change orders. At this point, we have a credit of roughly $200,000 to $250,000, so we have negative change orders at this point, and I think that's our experience on this project.
And that's the indication that we're trying to say we're doing our due diligence on any changes that come through.
Mm-hmm. But we busted the budget up front with the site work and the removal
Totally
and the
agree.
disposal.
Yep.
Yeah. I get it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Castro. I think we're basically at the end. I just have one quick question, if I could, either to the procurement officer or the solicitor, if I could. And I know Councilor Teixeira asked some of the questions associated with the procurement, but my question is, when a city puts out an RFP, you basically, let's say 3 companies apply or respond to the RFP, and we pick the lowest, more secured, or whatever the deal is, we select that bidder in a sense. And then the low bid becomes the highest bid, because this is exactly what's going on in this particular instance. Are we as a city not liable for some of the other 2 bidders that actually came in perhaps a little higher than what we had anticipated, and for some odd reason they were not selected because they were higher? And now all of a sudden they realize that, oh, by the way, the lowest bidder is coming out asking for 48% more than what they had bid in. Isn't the city in a position somewhere where some of these other companies can come in and say, hey, if I knew I could come in for 130 million, I would have done 120 million? Are we not liable for something like that? Madam law expert?
Mr. President, based on the folks in the audience, it would probably be inappropriate for me to give you a detailed answer on my response to what you're asking right now. Giving legal advice at a public microphone when the construction team, the OPM, and the architect are in the audience would not be the best approach. What I can tell you on the procurement question, certainly deferring to Mr. Morris, is that it's not an only price-based comparison. Price is not the determining factor. There are criteria and a team of individuals who evaluate those firms who have been pre-qualified and then also bid. It's 2 separate actions. Please correct me if I say anything wrong, because I'm not a trained procurement person. Mike and I just happen to work a lot together, and he shares his knowledge with me. But it's not. This is not a straight invitation for bids or other type of procurement that is only price-based.
But price plays an important part in this whole process. Otherwise, you're projecting a project for $98 million, and somebody bids $198 million. You're not going to give that person that project, correct? Or you're just going to say, well, they're a good, reputable company, therefore we're going to forego the 120 and the 100, but we're going to go to 198 because that happens to be...
The team that is evaluating the proposals is not comparing the prices. They are evaluating the technical and qualifications-based criteria that are set out partially in law, in regulations and statutes, but developed locally by the team because you know what you need. So the cheapest contractor that has never built a 50,000 square foot public safety complex did bid. That's not what I'm saying. But did bid, and so that's why it's not about the price at that initial stage.
Because what happens now to the taxpayers in this community, we had a project that we came up and funded for $98 million. Now we're going back to the taxpayers again saying, oh, by the way, that price is going to cost you 48% more than what you actually thought this was going to cost you. This is what I'm having a problem with in terms of going forward. We've got companies that bid on RFPs constantly, but if they know that they can commit and submit a change order for something as high as 48%, what are we setting up here going forward in the sense, saying, hey, In Brockton, you can low bid it in the sense, and then if worse comes to worse, you can crank it back up again because the body will come out and, it's a great project. I mean, mind you, I was just talking to the police chief a little while ago. I don't want to see duct tape all over the halls of that building because we're trying to cut costs. If we're going to pay $130 million for a building, it better be a building that looks like a $138 million building. But we're cutting costs. I also don't want to see the cost cutting coming off the back of the men and women that will be using that facility. Instead of having wood, whatever, you're going to put paper something. Instead of having screws, you're going to put duct tape on it. That's not what I personally don't want to see that. But I want to make sure that we're not coming here and open up a can of worms with other future projects that we might have going on in the city, sending a message that says, low bid it, and then you can come back to the body and you can submit a change order and they will fund up to 48% of the cost.
I can emphatically say those are not processes or procedures that I support, nor that Mr. Morris supports, nor that the mayor supports. Generally, there's a 25% cost overage in procurement unrelated to public construction and unrelated to projects of this magnitude. You're right, Council President. You don't just get to come in when you're the low bidder and change your price or change the game. This is not regular procurement. It's a very large construction project that is governed by Chapter 149 and the CMRs that go with it. And this project was sanctioned by the Inspector General. In order to go CMAR, you have to apply to the Attorney General and the Inspector General, and they have to approve it. Not until, I don't know if it's 2004 or 2014, Massachusetts didn't have alternative delivery methods. So this is still somewhat new to the Commonwealth. And these types of problems that we're talking about in these arenas are why the traditional design, bid, build teams don't want alternative delivery methods. But either way, here we are. There is not an inked guaranteed maximum price that you all were discussing. But there is the conversation that you're having, and it's all governed by law. It's not the lowest price bidder. It is a qualifications-based process. And then, of course, the price matters, but it's not the driver.
No, because we have that high school project coming up, and if we're not careful, it's going to happen again. And it's 48% of 98 million. Imagine what 48% of 600 million is going to look like. And that's the fear that some of us have, that will continue to live in this city long after we leave this. We're going to have to deal with this. So that's why I want to make sure that before we cross that road again, that we're in the position that we can decide and how to do this and do it the right way, so we're not sitting here a few years from now and talking about the same thing. Thank you. Thank you for your time. All right. I think we're done with this.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Councillor Minicello.
I was going to make a motion as well.
Go ahead.
Okay. I make a motion to reduce the amount requested from $48 million to $44 million. And I do that based on some of the information that we received with regard to availability of some grants that might be able to supplement or supplant that $48 million and bring it down to $44 million. It just seems like if we have $48 million, we're going to spend $48 million. If we limit it to $44 million and use some of that grant money, we basically save the taxpayers some monies, and if we need more money, we have a little bit more control over the costs in this. What I would characterize as an elephant.
So,
second.
On the motion?
On the motion, too.
On the motion, however meritorious that suggestion may be, we just went through an entire discussion here about how we should have known what the costs were initially, and that's why we're back asking for $48 million. I would much rather stay with the $48 million. If it's not spent, it doesn't go anywhere else. It doesn't go into some other account that can be used. But what I don't want to do, because everyone has come in here in a good faith and very detailed manner, presented what this project is now going to require for additional costs, I don't want to run the risk of finding out, oh, you know what, we're $2.5 million short, we're going to have to come back. I just think that would be a horrendous thing to do. So for the sake of $4 million, borrow the money. If you don't spend it, fine. But if it's needed, as has been demonstrated, then I think we ought to have it there. Because I just don't want to go through another one of these meetings where, well, you should have known, you could have known, we would have borrowed, we should have borrowed. Let's not do that, folks. Let's not do that. So I hope the amendment fails.
Councilor Lally and then Duranencourt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that part of the, if I may make the assumption, part of the logic of Councilor Minichiello's motion is that, yeah, we were just told in very thorough detail, which I appreciate, about where we are and the necessity for $48 million. In a similar way as we were told that we needed 98. And yeah, times have changed and there's, a need for that money. But I think, given past experience with this, given the parallels that I don't think really are parallel, that people try to match up with the, behavior of the schools, I think this is an opportunity for us to set, the tone that we wish be followed. And so if we are a little more conservative in what we parse out, I think that has a benefit both to the city and both to the way that, the handling of this is viewed. I also think that, when we approved 98, the rates were fantastic. They're not as great now, but $4 million, $4 million is not a lot in the scheme of this project. But also, I don't really know if we're going to see, the rates get that much worse anyway. And if they do get worse, it is $4 million. So if anyone has anything, to say, speak now or forever hold your peace. But I think that this is a reasonable measure to pace and hopefully reel in the expenses of the project. But I should say, while everyone's here, under no circumstances should the project be cheapened, because this will be a legacy 100-year building. I know the mayor's.
We have a motion on the floor.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, really quick, both Sullivan 1, Sullivan 2, not you, Mr. Mayor, but these two. Simple, like what impact would that reduction, have in terms of moving forward? Obviously, if we take $4 million from that $48 million, what could be the potential impact with the outcome of this? Honestly,
that's a great question, and that was something that I was speaking to Kevin about. Contractually, we can't move into a contract without having the funds available. Period. So if the 32.5 is what we asked for the construction portion of it, we can't finalize a GMP with Suffolk Construction to finalize the last 23 contracts that they have in place without having the funds available. So if we're $4 million short, there'll be $4 million worth of contracts on our end of it, whatever value it comes out of, whether it's the infrastructure or the construction, that we can't engage to finish the building.
So, in regard to, some recent information that we just got access to, right? Having a reduction, I'm assuming, will change everything, because it's like that $48 million is based on a calculation that you guys come up with. Like, if we have access to that money, that would be the outcome. But removing $1 from it might be very detrimental to the outcome of this project. Would that be a yes?
So there's two parts to that. One, the contractual values that we're getting right now to come up with our value that we felt it was $32.5 million is contract values that we currently have in place, subcontractor and non-filed subcontractor values to encompass to get us to the GMP based on all of the scope that we've discussed. That's why I feel so confident to say that I'm not coming back to see you other than say hello and we're going to do a ribbon cutting for more money. The value is what we're asking for is what we need to get to the final GMP to build you the public safety building.
Yeah, let me just say this for the record. I mean, obviously, we have been, we've made big investment, okay, in regard to what's going on here. And obviously, I understand, the concern with, overspending and all of that. And I think my colleague made a point, like, if we don't need that much money, obviously that money is not going anywhere. But I think at this point, especially at this time, I don't think $4 million should reignite another conversation here. So I guess, I'm in favor of that $48 million, given the fact that you acknowledge there will be no additional money. That's part of the reason. I'm 100% in favor of that. But in the event whereby we give you access to that $48 million and you come back, you can expect, I think by now you can expect what this council will do in regard to expressing our frustration. Because, like I said earlier, we are not against this. We want that.
Yep.
But what we are not in favor of is spending without control. And at the end of the day, I will not be responsible for reducing $4 million and stop this. I'm in favor of it. But I think my colleagues really want to know if we reduce $4 million, what would be the outcome? And if you say, hey, man, listen, if you reduce $4 million, we cannot move forward, then this thing's going to stop. I don't think we have to do that. But at the end of the day, they want to hear you honestly saying that $48 million is the way to go. And like I said, I'm in favor of it. There's no question about that. But I think you guys have an opportunity to truly, express yourself in terms of why it is important for us or for you to have access to $48 million, even though, based on the information that I received, there are money out there that you guys can tap into. But at the end of the day, it is up to you guys to sell that out.
Yep, so just a couple things. Not so long ago, maybe half an hour, you asked us if we could clearly say we will not be coming back to you. Your question was clear. I think our answers were quite clear. Respectfully, as consultants, we've worked with KBA, Suffolk, and the city of Brockton, and the folks that are going to occupy this building for several hours every week for the past 8 months to feel good about this number. So I can't say that, if you reduce it, that we won't need to come back to you, because we spent a lot of time getting to that 30,
No, I'll tell you this. I'm not in favor of that reduction, but I think people want to know.
Right. And so, you couldn't hit it on the nail harder. I mean, the bottom line is we need to guarantee that money to make sure we get the GMP. It's not that we're not stopping trying to figure out cost savings associated with that as we move forward. If there's money that doesn't need to be spent, we're going to reduce those costs and get it back to the city. Suffolk works diligently every job meeting that we have outside of the owners meeting to identify cost savings. And they let us know what those cost savings are, whether we accept it or not, because we feel it's good for the project or whether it's quality based. It happens on a weekly basis. So we're going to continue that through the duration and closeout of this project. So as far as exceeding any more money, that's not what we're looking for. We just want to make sure we have enough funds available to build this building and close it out to be able to give it to the city.
Let's take a vote on this.
Thank you. I think we're missing the point here. And before I go to Councilor Tavares, you came in saying that your project is now 130 million, 132 million.
It's what's the total value of the building?
Your side of it, take the road out of it.
Yeah.
Your side is 130.
Yeah, about a little over 130 million, correct?
130 million.
Yes, sir.
So if you take 130 million and you look at 48 million that you're asking for, you're getting 130 million because you already had 98. So you get 32 from the 48. So your project's all set. The road issue
The
is
$4
what we're
million.
looking at.
And if you can identify, I guess on your motion, if you can identify the $4 million less on the road issue, that's a whole separate issue.
No,
I'm talking
but
building
that's what I'm
only.
saying. It's not the end of the world here. We're not going to get into discussion to get
Okay.
this. But the reason why we got to that 44 is the fact that our commissioner had identified about $2.5 million worth of grants. And there's additional grants out there. There's an infrastructure monies that exist all over the state that we can go after to help us pay for some of this cost. So if it's not touching your building,
I'm fine with it.
your building, you're done. Your building
I'm
is
fine
good.
with that part of
So
it.
nobody's actually having a problem with that. The reason why we got to do this is, I think, what the councilor is saying, that we got to put some sort of, pull the reins back a little bit so that we actually have some sort of a resemblance of control over this thing, because it's getting out of
Understood.
whack. Councilor Tavares.
Thank you so much. Oh, thank you. Actually, I'm just going to be kind of comment to the discussion through my colleague against that. If they literally, I think the presentation was well done, well introduced, was very clear, and then the money is like what you guys asked for, and then the question was asked not to come back. That meaning, like, I think we should stick with the number. If they don't want you guys to come back, it's like what the number you guys asked for. If anything, the money left over, of course, is going to come back. Because my understanding is that question been over again. Don't come back, don't come back. Well, I think we should just compromise whatever they asking for. That's why, I want to say it right now. I am totally agree with 48 not to come back. And that's all. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Councilor Fowler.
Councilors, if we give the money that's required for the building, but we cut back on the road work, and we're not able to complete the road work, that has a direct negative impact on the operation of the fire department, their response time. I think what we're doing, and I understand being conservative and spending money, but you have all of these people who have told us, this is what we need to do to proceed. If there is money left over, it still stays with the city. If you borrow 48 million or you borrow 44 million, if you don't need that 4 million out of the 48, nothing is lost. But we run the danger of coming back here again, as I said before. And if we don't trust these people, then so be it. But maybe it's because I've had a chance to work with them and I know them. I don't think the amendment should pass. I think we should stay with the 48 million and then have that voted on. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? No. Go ahead, Lila.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure who this question would be for. The part of the project is redoing Highland. Does Highland need to be done, or can we recoup some money there?
Are you talking about the realignment of Highland Street, Councilor?
The realignment, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've looked at that several different ways. Part of the realignment process was to also provide parking for the building, which was pretty much lacking around the perimeter of the property. That was the only place that we could, that we had space enough to provide any parking. So as part of the realignment, we put a parking lot in that section. So it kind of serves two purposes. Does it have to be done? No, but then, it's kind of back to the drawing board. Now you've pushed a public way issue back onto the construction site.
Yeah, parking needs to be
putting a
found.
parking lot into the property itself.
Fair enough. Thank you, Commissioner.
And I just wanted to say, just to be clear, that we have $1.98 million worth of grants, not $4 million worth of grants. And then
Based on the numbers you gave me, it came out to 2.49.
2.4, well, one of them is for $350,000, or $35,000, actually.
Yeah, it was
Just for the
1.9 500,000 and then 35,000.
Is 1.48, and then there's 500,000.
Are you changing the numbers on us?
Mr. Chairman, you were so excited about that $500,000 grant, you added it twice.
Yeah. But the total grant value was 1.48 for the SMART grant. We got $500,000 from the Complete Streets program, and then we got an additional $35,000 for a bus shelter.
Plenty of state money out there for infrastructure. All right.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr.
A motion has been properly made in second
What's the motion?
to amend it from 48 to 44.
Okay.
Has been properly made in second. All those in favor of the amendment?
We do a roll call.
Roll call?
Roll call.
All right, roll call.
Councilor Duranencourt.
No.
Councilor Farwell.
No.
Councilor Griffin.
No.
Councilor Lally.
No.
Councilor Minicello.
Yes.
Councilor Nicastro.
No.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Yes.
Councilor Tavares.
No.
Councilor Texera.
No.
Councilor Thompson.
No.
8 in the affirmative, 2 in the negative. For the
44
amendment
it
to-
is.
No, the amendment does not carry.
48 it is, that's what I meant.
Now you need a motion to recommend that favorably.
Can we-
Motion to recommend favorably to the
Second.
full city council.
Motion has been properly made in second. All those in favor? All those opposed? It carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nothing but an open.
That stay there. Item 11, ordered that the city council authorizes the acceptance and expenditure of the total grant funds in the amount of $151,670 from the Department of Energy to the Department of Public Works. Invited DPW Commissioner Patrick Hill, Chief Financial Officer Troy Clarkson.
All right, Mr. Hill, you're on.
So this is a grant that we had applied for with the Department of Energy. It's going to be used for capital improvements.
All right, hold on, let's just let these folks out. Since they can't go quietly.
They're going to calculate their bonuses.
Go ahead, continue.
So we, after working with Troy and his group, we decided that the capital improvement would be the purchase of vehicles. We'll be purchasing 3 electric trucks, Ford trucks, for the entire amount of the $151,000.
Go ahead, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Why electric? Why not gas or diesel powered?
Because this was a DOER grant, or Department of Energy grant, and it was specifically to improve or select a capital project that was electric-based.
Okay. Understood. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just very quickly for the record, are they working trucks or are they people?
These will be working trucks. They'll be going to supervisors. They're 4-door F-150s. They'll be replacing vehicles in the fleet due to our capital restrictions based on the budgets. We're going to be putting them right into service, and they'll be driven every day.
Okay.
Boy, that was cute.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second. Motion has been properly made in second. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries. Finally, number 12.
Item 12, resolve to invite Brockton Police Chief Brenda Perez to appear before
gentleman was looking
the
for
Finance
keys.
Committee to discuss how the
I think we found the
department...
person whose keys that belong to.
Excuse me?
There was a gentleman looking for something, and I think it's the keys that we found.
Resolved to invite Brockton Police Chief Brenda Perez to appear before the Finance Committee to discuss how the department is addressing the operation of vehicles at excessive speeds on city streets, the operation of off-road unlicensed vehicles on city streets, and the use of illegal fireworks in the city of Brockton, all of which affect public safety, and such other related matters as she may share. Invited Chief Brenda Perez and her designees.
Madam Chief?
Good evening, councilors. Mr. President, the Brockton Police Department over the last 2 years has undertaken a proactive strategic approach to traffic issues to include speeding and off-road vehicles. Our strategic enforcement allows for a balanced approach and targeted enforcement. Some of the strategic enforcement has included directed patrols, collaborations with the Mass State Police, Environmental Police, Plymouth County Sheriffs, Mass State Police field sobriety checkpoints, traffic campaigns, pedestrian and bicycle safety campaigns, and traffic enforcement shifts. Captain Picaro is here to discuss further some of the things that we've been doing and to answer any questions. Thank you.
Good evening, Councilors. Captain Mark Picaro, Brockton Police, also the Brockton Traffic Commissioner. Like Chief Perez said, in the last couple years that she's been chief and I've been traffic commissioner, we've been approaching traffic enforcement in different and creative ways. First and foremost, and probably the one that you know the best, is the traffic unit. And most of you have reached out to me at one point or another with an issue that a citizen has brought to your attention in your wards or your areas, and then you'll either reach out to the chief or me, and in turn I reach out to the traffic unit, and I pass along that issue. And when they have a chance, I ask them, go into this area and take care of it. And they do, and they get back to me, and I try to email back to you, communicate that the issue has hopefully been resolved. As you know, as some of you know, sometimes the traffic unit has to cover down in patrol sectors, so they're not always available to handle issues. So what we do is, to fill in that gap when the traffic unit is not available, is we have traffic enforcement directed patrols. Again, an issue is brought to our attention either through you, a citizen, the mayor's office, and if the traffic unit can't handle it, we'll put in a directed patrol into the computer, into the dispatch computer, directing the sector car into a particular location to address a particular type of issue, whether it's traffic enforcement, parking enforcement, or just a general, maybe a property check. But, we're talking about traffic enforcement tonight. And they'll go into that area and they'll handle, if there's a stop sign issue going on a particular street, we'll send the sector car in between calls when they can to go in and try and address those issues. All in the computer, all the numbers are there, all recorded. Another thing that we've been doing that the chief has been very supportive of in the last year or so is, like she referenced, we team up with the Massachusetts State Police, the Massachusetts Environmental Police, Plymouth County Sheriff's Department, and BEMA gives us a hand too with communications issues. But we do these zero tolerance operations. And I'd say in the last year, we've probably done about half a dozen or so of those. And with a typical zero tolerance operation, we come in the evening, state troopers, plain clothes and uniform, Brockton Police, plain clothes, uniform, environmental police with their equipment. The Plymouth County Sheriff's Department supports us with prisoner transports and things like that. And we have a roll call. And then we go out and we just do proactive patrol traffic enforcement all night long. And, traffic enforcement just doesn't lead to motor vehicle stops and traffic tickets. It can lead to warrant arrests, drug seizures, gun seizures, a whole host of things. So traffic enforcement, especially with these zero tolerance patrols, have been very productive. Another thing that we do periodically, we've done at least 2 of them, maybe 3 of them in the last year or so with the state police, sobriety checkpoints. And those are typically done like 7 o'clock at night until about 3 in the morning. We do those overnight. But again, that's traffic enforcement related, drunk driving detection. And, the Mass DOT will come in and set up lanes, typically, secondary state routes in the city. And again, we just do proactive sobriety checkpoints, and anybody suspected of drunk driving is pulled off the road, subjected to further testing, and, if they're impaired, then they're, subject to arrest. And then one of the other things that we just started doing again that we've done in the past is we're having officers come in off duty and their off time, coming in for overtime, and in 4-hour blocks, 4-hour shifts to go into specific areas. We have broken them down into the sectors and the city's 4 sectors to go into sectors and just address traffic issues that have been brought to our attention in that sector. So in the last few weeks, we've been in the southeast sector addressing Ward 4 issues. We've been in the northeast sector addressing Ward 6 issues and Ward 5 issues. And most recently, we've been in the southwest sector addressing South Fuller Street for you, Councilor Tavares, and we'll continue in that area.
Thank you.
So that's kind of traffic enforcement in a nutshell. Be happy to take any questions.
Anybody? I know it's getting a little on the witching hours coming upon us. Councilor Griffin and then Texera.
Good evening, Chief. Captain, I just want to thank Captain Picaro and the Chief. Every time I reached out for you, any type of traffic enforcement in Ward 3, especially the captain, because this is your purview, you've been outstanding, putting people out. The Officer Perez did great work down on South Worst Street, and I appreciate all the efforts that you do for the citizens of Ward 3.
Thank you, Councilor.
You're welcome, Captain. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Griffin. Councilor Texer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Captain Picaro. What can we do about the dirt bikes and the RTV? You know, it's like, it's getting worse.
So the dirt bikes, the ATVs?
Yes, I'm sorry.
So some of the stuff that we've been doing is really what the captain has talked about. We have partnered up with the environmental police. They bring in their dirt bikes, and we are doing enforcement that way. But in addition to that, we also have the road safety that you guys just passed, the ordinance that we just passed for the gas stations, and I forget the name of it right now, but we have that we also can use as a tool. And also these extra shifts that we have put out over the last 3 weeks to try to mitigate some of the traffic issues that we have in the city. So all of that encompassing is how we're dealing with off-road vehicles.
Yeah, because yesterday, I was on North Main Street. There was 6 of them. They just came from nowhere. Pop and Willie. And all of a sudden, I'm coming on the side street. I go, you know, my question is, what happened if not because I want to do it, but if accident happens and they're not registered, none of those dirt bikes is registered, and they just pop and wheelie on the street, and God forbid, he killed one of them.
It's definitely a public safety concern that the captain and I both share, and we're always having this discussion about what can we do differently, how can we expand, are we doing everything that we can? So it's always an evolving conversation about how to be able to deal with the off-duty vehicles that we have.
And we cannot chase, means, the police cannot chase them, right?
No, we don't want to create an exigency where we do end up having somebody hurt or injured or, deceased.
Because they go on the sidewalks. They just on the sidewalks. And, you probably got innocent people just, pedestrians just walk on the sidewalk. All this. I guess, what can we do to prevent it?
I share in your concern, Counselor, when it comes to this real safety issue, and a safety hazard, really.
It is safety hazard. It is safety hazard. But, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Captain Picaro, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Anyone else? Entertain a motion?
Motion to recommend favorably.
A motion has been properly made in second to recommend this resolve favorably to the full City Council. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? It carries.
Thank you.
Next.
Chief, thank you, Captain.
For waiting, John.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Captain.
Have a good night.
Anyone has any sort of, Councilor Lally?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, moment of council's recognition.
Go for it.
All right. This Friday, August 23rd, from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. at Venue 727 on Warren Ave is the Friends and Mentors 4th Annual Summer Youth Gala. They're hoping to see some people there to show some support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Having absolutely no further business for the citizens and the residents of this city, the meeting is adjourned.